Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. That was over 3.6 million in yuan. To think that saving someone once would get him over 3 million yuan and a 60,000 point abyss item. Even robbing a bank wouldn't earn that kind of money this fast. After thinking it over, Luoshu glanced down at the agreement but ultimately pushed it back. I already accepted a reward yesterday. So, you should really take this back. But Tsubaka Haramira, clearly anticipating his refusal, simply smiled and replied, as I just said, the house is a gift in exchange for you continuing to live here. If you think this is too much, how about putting a 1-year term on it? Only then did Luoshu realize her true intent. It wasn't gratitude for saving her life. It was to keep him living nearby for longer? This motivation. Why did it feel a little suspicious? He gave her a subtle look, his expression turning a bit complicated. Deep down, he felt there was a high chance she had an ulterior motive. But this was the heiress of a major arms conglomerate. It wasn't like she lacked money. If it wasn't for wealth, was she after him? If she really decides to openly chase me down, I might not even last 3 days, Luoshu grumbled internally. Still, he knew better than to voice such thoughts out loud. She likes me was the kind of thing that was safe as an internal fantasy, but if said out loud and misjudged, it could ruin everything. If 1 year is too long, we can make it 6 months, Myra offered, retreating 1 step further upon noticing his prolonged silence. She added playfully, after yesterday's incident, my family has been pestering me to move back home. For the sake of a poor heiress's freedom, Luoshu-kun, won't you make a small sacrifice? That made Luoshu twitch slightly. While Myra might not have realized it, Luoshu knew full well that if she really returned home where security was tighter, his plan to recruit new members would go up in smoke. Laying my cards on the table feels risky. But if I take the house, I doubt I'll be able to sleep well at night. I don't want to be called a freeloader or anything. After some internal debate, Luoshu let out a sigh and reached for the agreement on the table. Seeing him accept it, Tsubaka Haramira visibly relaxed. A hint of genuine happiness surfaced on her face. In my hometown, Luoshu said, there's an old saying. Courtesy demands reciprocity. As he spoke, he summoned a contract from thin air and laid it on the table in front of the surprised Myra. There's something I need to tell you next. I hope you won't share this with anyone. Especially not your parents. I understand. The moment she saw how serious Luoshu had become, Myra adjusted her posture and sat upright, nodding respectfully. This is the contract for my secret organization. Astronomy Club. Luoshu pushed the contract toward her and said, I imagine you've looked into the organization behind those hounds from yesterday. In that case, you should already know how secret societies and cults in this country usually get their start, right? I've read a bit, Myra replied thoughtfully. It has something to do with acquiring abyss items that grant supernatural powers to others. Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. She glanced down at the contract, then looked back up at Luoshu, the dots clearly connecting. Luoshu didn't deny it. He simply nodded. By signing this contract, you'll awaken your own supernatural ability. He continued, the Astronomy Club has no connection to SDS. It's an entirely personal organization. Just mine. To be honest, it currently only has 3 members, including myself. With that said, Luoshu fell silent, shifting the decision into Myra's hands. A 3-person group. By any metric, a tiny and unreliable faction in the world of secret organizations. Many such groups that had lucked into powerful abyss items were viewed as snacks by larger organizations. The best-case scenario was being absorbed along with their items and personnel. Worst case? The people would vanish, and only the items would be retained. As someone well-versed in the dynamics of these shadowy circles, Tsubaka Haramira was fully aware of how little she needed such a group. At least on paper. Her background meant she didn't need to join anyone. But sometimes, decisions aren't made by reason, but by emotion. After a short pause, she maintained her smile and asked calmly, Has Luoshu-kun studied the side effects of the abyss items that grant powers? Side effects, huh? Luoshu knew the system's follower subsystem ensured loyalty and deep personal binding. But since revealing that outright was a bad idea, he rephrased it. The side effects are, once you sign the contract, you can't betray the organization or deliberately harm other members. Also, members will become connected through bonds akin to a blood-related family. Of course, the organization doesn't force members to carry out missions, especially not suicidal ones. In that sense, our abyss items are high grade. He then raised his right hand, clearly showing the ruby ring on his finger. That's why this concerns my life and safety. If Miss Myra chooses to decline, I'll break our agreement from yesterday and use Heart of the Demon to hypnotize you. Make you forget all of this. But to Luoshu's surprise, Tsubakahara Myra simply tilted her head and asked curiously, "You'd just make me forget? You're not planning to do anything else? Huh?" That completely caught Luoshu off guard. But before he could respond, Myra had already pulled out a pen. Clearly prepared for this. And signed her name onto the contract without hesitation. With a radiant smile, the beautiful young woman turned to him and said, "Well then, we're accomplices now, aren't we?" Luoshu paused for a moment, then chuckled helplessly. "You're right, Miss Myra," he said. "We're accomplices now." Chapter 37, Luoshu's investment. After the contract was signed, Luoshu looked at Miss Tsubakahara, now his accomplice, and the corners of his lips curved upward slightly. "Before helping you awaken your abilities, would you mind if we changed locations?" "Oh? Sure," Tsubakahara Myra replied with a slight tilt of her head, then stood up and watched Luoshu do the same. Under her curious gaze, Luoshu walked over to his study room door. He grasped the doorknob, twisted it downward, unlocked it. But didn't go in. Instead, he repeated the unlocking motion 2 more times. Myra blinked and stepped forward, puzzled. "Is the door broken?" "No, it's just the required unlocking procedure to access our base," Luoshu explained as he finally pushed the door open and walked in. Still confused by Luoshu's so-called unlocking steps, Myra followed him into the room. Only to freeze in astonishment at the sight of the massive hall before her. She quickly turned to glance behind her. And saw Luoshu's familiar living room. Turning back with a dumbfounded look, she mumbled, "The study is this big? A massive hall like this in a regular apartment? And she was supposed to be the owner of this property? That's why I call it a base," Luoshu said as he snapped his fingers. Instantly, a long redwood table and 2 birch chairs appeared in the previously empty space. Luoshu walked over, pulled one of the chairs out, and sat down at the far end of the table. "This alternate dimension is accessible through my study. Twist the handle 3 times to open it. Of course, this function is limited to members of the organization. If it weren't restricted, anyone who figured out the trick could barge into the base." Though Luoshu trusted his current members not to spill secrets, basic security was still essential. "Please, have a seat." Myra closed the door behind her and curiously observed the oversized living room. Her gaze briefly paused on a sofa and a refrigerator off to the side before she finally sat down opposite Luoshu. Noticing her looking around, Luoshu chuckled and explained, "Sorry for the sparse setup. We're still a startup organization, so amenities are limited." "I completely understand," Myra said with a nod, then looked at Luoshu's face. "So, how does the ability awakening process work?" "Just sit right there. It'll be over soon." As he spoke, Luoshu activated the system using his will, initiating the process through the contract they had just signed. The system responded instantly. The moment the contract was accepted, the awakening process began. Request received. Energy collection device activated. Granting ceremony initiated. The same intricate ceremonial array Luoshu had already seen twice before lit up once again. But for Myra, who was witnessing it for the first time, it was a wonder to behold. She sat there, slightly agape, looking adorably stunned. "Congratulations, host's follower Tsubakahara Myra has awakened the common ability Enhanced Comprehension." Luoshu furrowed his brows slightly at the prompt, wondering what kind of ability it was, when a second notification followed. "Congratulations, host's follower Tsubakahara Myra has awakened the common ability Dexterous Hands." Luoshu blinked in surprise and immediately asked the system, "So followers can awaken multiple abilities on their first try?" Explanation: if a follower has potential in a specific direction but lacks the depth to manifest a higher level ability, the result may be a downgraded and split ability outcome. Luoshu was astonished. "So basically, you have the talent, but just not enough of it? Was that lucky or unlucky? Then what exactly is Myra's natural ability direction?" Explanation: Elite rank ability Alchemy, composed of the elite skills Deconstruction, Craftsman, and Scholar. Follower Tsubakahara Myra currently lacks talent in the analysis direction. It is recommended to acquire common ability material observer's dust to supplement the lacking aptitude, alchemy's lower tier forms, and lacking analysis aptitude. Reading this, Luoshu stared at the beautiful girl in front of him with a complicated expression. Not only had he casually rescued a heroine, but she also turned out to have alchemical talent? Are heroines always this favored by fate? Is Lady Luck secretly a Yuri fan? As the ceremony concluded, Myra opened her eyes again. Her vision had shifted. Everything around her now looked different. It feels like the world has changed a little. Luoshu smiled at her reaction and explained, usually after awakening an ability, your body will adapt over the next 1 to 3 days. There's nothing to worry about. What you're experiencing is normal. I see, Lord God, Myra replied with a playful smile. Thank you for your guidance. Luoshu sighed at the teasing. So, this is part of the knowledge transfer for followers, huh? He felt slightly exasperated. At his current level, calling himself a god was laughable. He barely qualified as one of Japan's countless spirits. Just thinking about it was embarrassing. Still, as a way to build rapport with a beautiful girl, it wasn't so bad. Ding, congratulations, host has acquired a new follower. 10,000 points awarded. Monthly point income increased to 3,000, seeing this prompt made Luoshu feel a bit better. He looked up at Myra and asked, do you understand your abilities now? Do you mean the ones under alchemy? Myra paused briefly, but soon her knowledge as a follower kicked in and she understood. You're referring to the missing analysis talent, right? Yes. Luoshu nodded as he purchased the observer's dust from the system and materialized a glass cup within the base. This is observer's dust. It's a material that will grant you the analysis aptitude. Don't refuse it. Just think of it as an investment on my part. Fortunately, observer's dust was relatively inexpensive, costing only 1,000 points. The ability it granted was the common level observation. Considering he'd just earned 10,000 points from Myra, Luoshu didn't mind spending a little. From the earlier Heart of the Demon and Lucky Wallet, it was clear how vital an alchemist could be to an organization. Alchemists were the key to elevating a secret group from a primitive state of artifact use to an industrial level of exploration and creation. So even if it seemed a little unfair to Utaha and Ariri, Luoshu didn't hesitate to fund Myra's full potential. Honestly, if he had the 30,000 points necessary, he would have loved to boost all 3 of her abilities to the excellent level. Just to see what kind of return it would generate. But with only 16,983 points left, he had to give up on that idea for now. An investment, huh? Myra murmured softly. Then she looked up at Luoshu with a gentle smile. As a follower in service of a god, I guess I have no choice but to accept your generous investment. Chapter 38, the artifact expert's opinion coming from a capitalist family. Tsubakahara Myra understood the concept of investment very well. Yet, to her, Luoshu's so-called investment felt more like a clever excuse. Sure, there was a chance to gain something from her abilities, but she suspected that what Luoshu truly sought wasn't limited to just that. After casting a glance at Luoshu, Myra picked up the observer's dust that had appeared on the table. She paused for a moment, and a glass of water materialized in her hand. When it came to providing everyday items, the base's system was like a magical utility bot. Able to produce nearly anything useful in modern life, as long as it didn't exceed the value of 1 point. Understanding this, Luoshu wasn't at all surprised by Myra conjuring a glass. By then, Myra had already poured the dust into the cup and, under Luoshu's watchful eyes, swirled the liquid before closing her eyes and downing it in one gulp. Like bitter herbal medicine. From his seat across the table, Luoshu clearly saw Myra's throat shift as she swallowed. After waiting about 5 or 6 seconds, he asked, "How do you feel?" Myra frowned slightly, looking uncomfortable. "Not much of a difference. Maybe I need something appropriate to trigger it." Hearing this, Luoshu immediately spent 300 points from the system and exchanged them for a fake Heart of the Demon. He placed the ring in front of Myra. "Try this." Heart of the Demon? Myra gave him a puzzled look before picking up the ring and narrowing her eyes to examine it. A moment later, she muttered, "Strange. I feel like if I had enough time and materials, I could actually recreate this thing." That realization surprised Myra. Yet the intuition was clear and overwhelming. She could almost see what kind of materials would be needed to produce the Heart of the Demon. 10 milliliters of diluted succubus blood, 3-carat ruby, 30 grams of mercury. Myra, who had mentally read off the ingredients and even the quantities, slowly raised her head and looked blankly at Luoshu. "I think I might not have a home anymore." In that moment, Myra realized how dangerous her newfound abilities were to her family's business, and more importantly, to her position within the family. Even though she trusted her relatives, she trusted their sense for profit even more. And in this world, family bonds were the one thing she absolutely couldn't afford to gamble on. If they learned that she could replicate deep abyssal artifacts like the heart of the demon, not even her beloved grandfather might be able to shield her from the family's thirst for profit. When she said she might not have a home anymore, Luoshu blinked in confusion before quickly realizing what was weighing on her mind. It was the first time he had encountered this sort of situation, so he struggled for words, repeating the same clumsy reassurance, as long as you keep things confidential, it should be fine. Even he didn't believe that was convincing, so he quickly added, actually, that ring isn't the real heart of the demon. It's a replica I made. It costs only about 1/200th of the original's value and has severely degraded effects. So your concerns probably won't materialize. At least, not yet. That part was true. The system's internal pricing backed him up. There was a huge difference in the capabilities of an alchemist who could produce elite artifacts and one who could only make crude imitations. So, while Myra's concerns were still valid, the risk wasn't nearly as extreme as she had imagined. A replica? Myra raised her eyebrows and carefully examined the ring again. Based on the materials, she reverse-engineered its properties and said in surprise, it only works on charm-type entities, and it can only charm a single person. The command issued can only be one instruction, it lasts 5 minutes, and it's ineffective on mentally strong or highly resistant individuals. Yep, definitely degraded. Having personally come into contact with the real heart of the demon the day before, Myra could instantly feel the difference. The original was still beyond her newly awakened powers to resist. But the replica? She felt like she could crush its influence with her willpower at any time. In fact, her spiritual strength seemed to still be rising rapidly. It hadn't even stabilized yet. Realizing this, Myra finally let out a sigh of relief. Looks like I overreacted. While she was analyzing the ring, Luoshu noticed faint bluish patterns surfacing in her pupils. A phenomenon that seemed to be the visible activation of her lower-tier analysis ability. He glanced at the system's notifications. Follower Tsubakahara Myra has acquired the common ability observation. Follower Tsubakahara Myra now has a supplemented aptitude. With the common skills observation, enhanced comprehension, and dexterous hands, a stable configuration has been formed. Excellent tier skill artifact creation acquired. Seeing that, Luoshu immediately understood Myra's current status. He deduced that she had probably just ascended her classification. Judging by the system's metrics from yesterday, when he acquired 3 excellent tier skills and moved his own individual rank up to excellent, Myra was now most likely at the common rank. Of course, that didn't mean an average civilian's common, but the entry point into the world of supernatural ability users. A far superior benchmark. So, 3 common tier skills can combine into 1 excellent skill. But 3 elite tier skills like alchemy remain elite even when combined. Is that because the elite class is special? Some kind of next stage evolution of life? And my 3 excellent tier skills didn't merge into something stronger because they lacked synergy? As he thought this over, Myra removed the ring and gently placed it back on the table. Are you planning to turn this fake over to SDS? Luoshu shook his head. No. Chief Takabana didn't ask for it to be submitted. She gave it to me for safekeeping and use. This replica is just to satisfy inspection. To let you keep and use it? Myra looked puzzled for a moment, then suddenly connected the dots and said knowingly, so they're keeping the abyssal artifact inside SDS, huh? Seems like Chief Takabana is trying to help her friend rise within Zeus Industries. When it came to internal politics at massive arms conglomerates, Luoshu preferred to just listen and take notes. If he ever got dragged into one of their power struggles, he'd probably fake his death and run. Or maybe even switch sides and join Myra's entourage. After all, the only reason he joined SDS in the first place was to help him adjust to this strange new world. He hadn't signed up to fight and bleed for anyone else's ambition. Sure, that made him a bit of an opportunist, but working didn't mean he was offering up his life. His wasn't that cheap. So, his role in SDS would remain exactly as he intended, a high-functioning slacker, a normal guy among elites. And for that label, a powerful abyssal artifact was unnecessary. The degraded version of the heart of a demon was just right. Well? Do you think this thing can fool Zeus Industries' research team? Although Myra had only recently awakened her powers, Luoshu didn't underestimate what her skills could do. So naturally, he turned to the club's newly minted artifact expert for her assessment. Myra thought for a moment. Though she wasn't responsible for artifact research in her family, her aunt, who was in charge of that division, had taught her enough basic knowledge to avoid mishandling dangerous artifacts. Thanks to that, Myra's understanding of abyssal artifacts already surpassed anyone else in the astronomy club. From what I know, current technology can't fully analyze the composition of abyssal artifacts. Especially with powerful ones. Even if they extract a lot of data, they never believe what they've got is the full picture. So, unless something unexpected happens, The specialists at Zeus Industries probably won't notice anything wrong. And even if they do, they'll just assume that this is the artifact's true form. So, in other words, it's safe? Luoshu grinned, picked up the replica from the table, lightly tossed it into the air, and caught it again. Then that makes things simple. Chapter 39, even though you say that. Outside room 303, Luoshu finished adjusting the navy blue button-up uniform of Toyosaki Academy. After changing into his shoes at the entryway, he opened the door and turned his head to glance at Tsubaka Haramira inside the room. I mean, I don't really mind, but are you sure you're just going to stay here like this? Myra smiled and made an okay gesture before stretching lazily. Choosing whether or not to show up for work freely. That's a special right reserved for proper members of society, you know. No, I wasn't talking about that. I meant, doesn't it seem a little inappropriate for a girl to be staying at a guy's place? And what do you mean members of society can decide freely whether or not to work? That's a boss's privilege. Luoshu couldn't help mentally grumbling. He looked up at Myra and added, don't go overboard. He could somewhat understand her excitement. After all, she had just awakened her abilities and was eager to try them out. And the best place to test them was naturally the astronomy club's base. So her reason for staying behind in Luoshu's apartment was obvious. Still, even as he acknowledged that, another thought slipped into his mind, a stunning beauty like her is hanging out alone at my place, huh? How am I supposed to focus in class now? With that thought lingering, Luoshu stepped out the door. Just as it was closing, a cheerful voice called out from inside, Bon voyage seriously, what a weird feeling. He muttered, standing at the doorway for a second before slinging his bag over his shoulder and heading for the elevator. He is coming out, said Denoe Takina, lowering her binoculars. Her voice was calm and analytical. Should we try to make contact now? Huh? Let me see too. Chisato Nishikigi mumbled through a mouthful of hamburger as she walked over and took the binoculars from Takina, peering out toward the apartment. Within a minute, Luoshu stepped out through the glass doors of the building. He looked around, clearly surveying his surroundings. Chisato drew out her tone with interest and took another bite of her burger. He is being super obvious about it. If anyone else were watching him, they'd have spotted him instantly. Takina sighed at that. You do realize he's a rookie, right? So why was he given such a risky assignment in the first place? Because it's not that risky, Chisato replied breezily. That's what the boss said. Come on, think about it. We're dealing with an abyssal artifact like the heart of the demon. For women like us, the risk is huge, right? She waved her half-eaten burger for emphasis. So, the boss chose Luoshu because he's male and also the one who saved that young lady. It made sense to send him. Takina was silent for a moment before replying. I don't disagree with the chief's logic. But still, this kind of task is way above a rookie's pay grade. The one assigned should have been someone experienced in infiltration and surveillance, not a newbie. It's irresponsible. Chisato didn't seem surprised by her concern and shrugged. The problem is, Takina, we don't have any veterans like that in SDS. Ugh. Takina flinched at that. Reality hit hard. After a pause, she could only sigh in resignation. Seeing her sigh, Chisato waved dismissively. Alright. Luoshu's fine for now, right? In some ways, things are still under control. Oh. He spotted us. Nice. And we're so far away too. Grinning, she lowered the binoculars and waved toward Luoshu. Hey. Over here. Wait. Chisato. Takina was instantly alarmed by her bold action. If someone's secretly observing him, they might have just spotted us. Chisato, unconcerned, replied lightly, nope. My gut says there's no hidden surveillance. Well, excluding our upstairs neighbor. Considering the relationship between that young lady and Luoshu, I'd say we can safely remove her from the list of potential threats. With a mischievous glint in her eye, Chisato tilted her head slightly and looked toward the third-floor walkway of the apartment. There, leaning against the railing and watching Luoshu leave, stood none other than Tsubaka Haramira. Wow. Luoshu, huh? Advancing that far in just one night? Did he already reach third base? Maybe second? Surely not just first? Takina's face flushed red as she immediately slapped a hand over Chisato's mouth. That's way too indecent. MMPH. Chisato flailed and raised her hands in surrender. The two of them tumbled to the side, still play fighting. 10 minutes later, Luoshu stood outside a hotel room door and knocked twice. Just a second, coming. Came Chisato's voice from inside. A second voice, calm and composed, followed, I'll get the door. But then. Takina. Your clothes. Chisato shouted. Ah. Oh no. The previously composed voice now sounded flustered. Standing outside, Luoshu had heard everything, and his expression turned extremely conflicted. Should he knock again? Or not? Just what exactly are you two doing in there? Mind letting me take a peek? Booming voice. Soon, the door opened, revealing Chizato's grinning face. Sorry to keep you waiting, partner. Rather than that, Luoshu said, glancing past her into the room. What was going on earlier? And there she was. Inoue Takina, with her over-the-shoulder black hair and violet eyes, standing by the TV, furiously dabbing at her short uniform skirt with a tissue. And beneath it, plain black safety shorts ruined the mood entirely. Ah, that. Chisato waved a hand. Tomato ketchup from the burger got on her skirt. Takina's just hopeless. Totally ignored the setting. The burger fell, the skirt got stained. Life is tough. Chisato sighed dramatically. From inside, Takina's voice carried a note of irritation. That happened because of your inappropriate remarks in the first place. Inappropriate? Luoshu glanced at Chisato. Her face scrunched up like a steamed bun, and she stuck out her tongue. She started it. She hit me first. Takina bit her lip, glaring silently at Chisato. Trying to lighten the mood, Chisato quickly tugged Luoshu into the room. Alright, no point focusing on the little stuff. Come on in, Luoshu. The moment he stepped in, the door slammed shut behind them. Chisato clapped him on the shoulder. You did good, partner. It must have been tough last night, huh? You had to approach that lady under the watchful eyes of her bodyguards, and at the same time, secretly search her belongings for any signs of abyssal artifacts. Just managing to get through the night without being caught is an accomplishment on its own. She patted his shoulder repeatedly, full of sympathy. Meanwhile, Takina offered some comfort from the side as well. Even though the mission failed, don't worry. The responsibility lies with the chief for assigning it so poorly. Not on you. Even though you say that. Luoshu looked at his concerned colleagues, then slowly pulled a ruby ring out of his pocket. But I actually got the target. The room fell silent. Chapter 40, a bit unreliable. Inoue Takina stared blankly at the ruby in Luoshu's palm, its blood-red surface housing a vertical pupil. For a moment, she was stunned, before abruptly recalling the information on that item. Heart of the Demon, a demonic abyssal artifact capable of hypnotizing women. Realizing this, Takina quickly turned her gaze away from the ring. In contrast, Chisato Nishikigi, whose eyesight was far keener than Takina's, kept her eyes locked on the gem, her mouth letting out a string of surprised exclamations. No way. She circled around Luoshu, tapping her chin with one finger. Is that the real deal? No way. Then she gasped again and clapped her hands on Luoshu's shoulders. You didn't just win her over in one night, you even found the ring? Luoshu thought about her words for a second and replied with a strangely complicated expression, as misleading as your phrasing is. Factually speaking, it's not wrong either. Got the heart of the demon? Check. Won the girl over? Well, she did join the astronomy club, so that kind of counts. In that case, Luoshu had truly made a clean sweep of both the person and the artifact. Amazing. So, this is what the power of a super rookie looks like. Chisato clapped exaggeratedly, her tone a bizarre mix of admiration and jest. Meanwhile, Takina, still avoiding eye contact with the artifact, gave Luoshu a complicated look and said, in a way. I suppose super rookie fits. To complete such a mission in just one night. It was undeniably impressive. Though it seemed like his specialty lay in dealing with women. The thought made Takina uneasy. Given the ring's hypnotic power over women, she found herself hesitating to meet Luoshu's eyes. The fact that Luoshu had not only managed to handle the young heiress but also brought back the abyssal artifact safely led Takina to mentally tag him as possibly dangerously charming. Maybe. Just maybe. He was more dangerous to women than the heart of the demon itself. While Takina was caught up in her uneasy speculation, Chisato suddenly grabbed her arm and chirped, "Oh right. Luoshu, you haven't met her properly yet, right? This is Takina, Inoue Takina. Our SDS ace." Chisato. Takina flushed slightly at the praise, clearly unused to such open compliments. And by the way, her height's 160 centimeters, she's 16 years old, and her weight is. We don't need that much detail. Takina lunged forward and clapped her hand over Chisato's mouth, who panicked and tried to wriggle free. Wait. I won't say anything more. Calm down, Takina. Calm down. As the two of them wrestled playfully, Luoshu could only sigh, slipping the ring back into his pocket. You two really do get along, huh? Hey, don't just stand there watching. Come help me. Chisato whined as she struggled against Takina's headlock. But after Luoshu's comment, Takina's face turned redder. She shot Chisato a warning glare and finally let go, scolding her in a low voice, "Stop going off topic when it has nothing to do with work." I just wanted to help us bond a little faster as teammates, Chisato explained, as if that made everything okay. She sighed, walked over to the table, pulled a burger out of a KFC bag, and tossed it to Luoshu. Luoshu caught it instinctively and looked at her, puzzled. It's oily and salty, sure, but decent for a quick bite, Chisato said while glancing out the window. Seeing no suspicious figures near the apartment, she shrugged and added, looks like we're not being watched. And since we've got the heart of the demon, there's no need to keep monitoring Tsubaka Haramira anymore. With that, she began dismantling the sniper rifle she'd placed nearby, moving with practiced ease. Takina, pack it up. We're moving out. Understood. Takina immediately got to work, efficiently tidying up their contraband scattered around the room. Swiss Army knives hidden under pillows, pistols taped beneath the bed, threads wrapped around the doorknob. Luoshu watched, dumbfounded, as they quickly stowed it all into violin cases. Watching this organized chaos, Luoshu twitched at the corner of his mouth and looked at the ring again. He turned to Chisato and asked, shouldn't this be submitted for a side effects check? Oh, that can wait. Just swing by Lycaris after school. Chisato chuckled behind her hand, giving him a teasing look. But whatever you do, don't use that abyssal artifact at school, okay? I mean, I want to say I won't, but are you guys seriously letting me carry this around at school? Luoshu shook the ring slightly, clearly baffled. No need to worry. It's all under control, Chisato reassured him with a smile as she zipped up the violin case. A specialist in abyssal artifacts is transferring to Toyosaki Academy today. She'll find a chance to contact you on campus. And if not, she'll join us later at Lycaris anyway. Oh, and she's also your future occult studies instructor. She wagged a finger playfully, her grin radiant. And beyond that, having you go to school as usual helps us keep things clean. Even though the neighbor upstairs let us off the hook, we still need to maintain appearances. Gotta keep up the illusion. After all, with that, Chisato and Takina slung their violin cases over their shoulders. Chisato handed Luoshu a small stack of 12 talismans. Here they're basic sealing charms for abyssal artifacts. Should be enough to suppress it for about 2 days, according to our support team. Luoshu took the talismans, drawn with vermilion symbols, and muttered, this really doesn't feel reliable at all. Just roll with it, okay? Chisato giggled and patted him on the shoulder. Then, with her hand on the doorknob, she added, don't forget to come by the cafe after school. Good luck. You've got this, Takina said softly as she passed him and caught up with Chisato. Once the room was empty again, Luoshu let out a long sigh of relief. He picked up the counterfeit ring he'd exchanged from the system and muttered, I really don't know if I passed the test. Or totally failed. And now they want me to go to school? What a headache. He sighed deeply, having hoped today might be an excuse to skip class. Chapter 41, The Willful Young Lady at the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Headquarters. Inside the office dedicated to SDS, Takabana Girika was reviewing a stack of documents. With a bug-proof phone tucked between her shoulder and cheek, she wore a faint smile as she said, so you really managed to bring that occult studies expert from Kyoto to teach Luoshu, huh? That must have been quite the effort. On the other end of the line, a gentle voice replied, it was just a necessary faculty arrangement. After all, that child is the first warlock we've ever recruited within the island nation. There was a slight pause before the voice lowered, as if muttering, and he was pretty much strong-armed by you, wasn't he? Is he still upset about that? The woman on the other end sounded somewhat exasperated. Girika laughed heartily at her friend's jab. Oh, don't start lecturing me now. You know exactly how I am. When a wild treasure jumps right in front of me, how could I possibly resist picking it up? And besides, I'm a generous mentor, guiding him into the adult world. If he's not gifting me some limited edition designer bags in return, that's already enough of a loss. Being angry on top of that? What does he have to be upset about? Totally in line with your personality, Girika, the woman on the line responded with a helpless yet indulgent tone. Sure, we do have an urgent need for warlock. But instead of attracting them with ideology, coercing them like this. Girika, this time you really went too far. The one who's more willful than me doesn't have the right to speak, Girika shot back. You're the one who suddenly decided to form the SDS one day. Who do you think I'm working for here, Lady President? She huffed and continued, clearly annoyed, and that kid clearly saw the benefits and went with the flow. How did this become me coercing him? All I did was tell him how the police treat people like him. That's it. Maybe you should read the report a few more times before pointing fingers, you willful heiress. After venting, Girika returned to flipping through her paperwork. Anyway, off-topic stuff aside. If we can train this warlock properly, it'll mark a solid start for SDS here in Japan. And those abyssal artifacts we've been holding on to. The ones normal people can't use. They might finally have a reliable handler. She paused, raising her head slightly, her expression turning serious. If this foundation for preserving peace and order finally stabilizes, I honestly don't know how to feel. Lucas Klein. My dearest friend. Don't you have something to say to me for all my hard work? A soft chuckle echoed through the speaker, followed by a gentle, soul-soothing voice. You've worked hard, my dear friend. Garika removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose, sighing deeply. Even if it's just our delusion, let's hope this world can stay peaceful a little longer. Even if the ever-encroaching abyss tries to swallow it whole. With that, she hung up, slid her glasses back on, and silently turned to the title on the report before her, Speculative Countdown to the Apocalypse. Another one of these tired reports. Garika muttered as she twirled her pen with mild irritation. Just then, her encrypted phone rang again. Hello? This is me. Chisato? Is there finally some development with Luoshu? It's fine if he failed, this was always supposed to be practice for him. What? He found it in one night? Garika froze, stunned by the report coming from Chisato on the other end. At a park near the private Toyosaki Academy, by the fountain, a tall girl with long black hair stood gracefully with her school bag in hand. Her face was expressionless as she looked at the tardy Luoshu and said coldly, not a single line message all night, and then just a last-minute meet at the park text right before class. Luoshu, are you secretly living some wild, nightlife-filled double life where you go off-grid the moment you're at your club? Hearing that, Luoshu was momentarily stunned, then glanced at her curiously before replying, there was a bit of an unexpected situation last night. I tried to message you, but saw through the internal network that you'd already gone to bed early. He paused, then teased, wait, don't tell me you actually listened to me and started going to bed early. Could it be that Ms. Kasumijoka is a good girl who follows instructions? Kasumijoka Utaha went silent for a moment before speaking with a complicated expression. My neck hurts. And my foot too. Luoshu blinked, confused. How did the topic shift so suddenly? Utaha sighed at his clueless expression and explained with visible frustration, I stayed up way too late the night before, and yesterday morning I didn't get a chance to nap because we were chatting. So, I ended up falling asleep on the sofa after school and didn't wake up until the next morning. When I saw the time on the wall clock, I panicked, thinking I'd missed your message from last night. In my hurry to find my phone, I twisted my ankle and got a stiff neck from sleeping on the couch. I'm such an idiot. Utaha muttered in self-loathing. She had completely forgotten that she could have checked Luoshu's status via the internal network. She hadn't adjusted to the fact that things were different now. So, this morning's jab was your way of coping? Luoshu asked with a mix of amusement and exasperation, thinking that her intelligence today definitely didn't match her graceful appearance. The system's healing only works at the base. Instant transfers need points. But you could have gone to the club room early for treatment. Why do you wait here? Utaha gave him a blank stare. Please don't overestimate someone who was still a regular person yesterday. Then, eager to change the subject, she asked, so, what happened last night that made you go completely silent? My identity as a psychic was discovered by what seems to be a semi-official organization. I've been dealing with the fallout since then. Utaha froze, clearly stunned. Wait, the same official people who are always scrambling around trying to solve weird murders in Picket Town? They actually have that kind of capability? Luoshu gave her a strange look, clearly not expecting that to be her frame of reference. That organization is backed by a military arms conglomerate that works behind the scenes. The actual Japanese authorities just provide funding and some support. I see. So not the government as I imagined. In that case, their efficiency makes a lot more sense. Utaha casually made a remark that would probably give the police department a stroke if they ever heard it. Then she smirked and added teasingly, looks like a certain god went through a lot of trouble yesterday to protect his little follower. Chapter 42, doesn't suffer even a bit of loss. Now's not the time to tease me, Luoshu sighed. Life wasn't easy. Though I was discovered, thankfully they assumed my powers came from a very rare artifact. That kind of item is considered a treasure, and the chances of someone encountering the same thing again are pretty slim. The artifact's lucky wallet made from the scales of a semi-divine being, was worth a staggering 80,000 points. If such deep abyss tools could be mass-produced, the world would already be in chaos. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that better detection-type artifacts might still find people like us. That's why I'm planning to allocate part of my points into concealment. Given the situation, Luoshu had already asked the system, who liked to see itself as a support tool, how many points were needed to add stealth functions to their wristbands. I checked. It's about 2,000 points. It'll let us add a concealment function to all wristbands, though it won't work against hero-ranked individuals or above. But considering our current situation, That should be enough. Thanks for letting me know, but something like this, which benefits all of us, you should just decide on your own. Be a little more assertive, my great god. Despite what she said, Kasumajoka Utaha's mood seemed to lift noticeably. So, to summarize, other than you, both Ariri and I are in a relatively safe zone, and thanks to you joining this official Papa Club, we also get access to insider info on special incidents. Looks like Utaha's brain was finally back online. That's pretty much the situation, Luoshu nodded, acknowledging her summary. But that also makes it the most dangerous setup. You, the core of the entire familia, are now an undercover agent within another organization. Utaha sighed, clearly troubled by the implications. But what was done was done. She wasn't involved at the time and didn't have the full picture to criticize Luoshu's judgment. So, she simply added, if there comes a time you need to use my ability, just tell me. While her mind reading wasn't much use in combat, it was still great for extracting intel. Actually, we're already in that situation, Luoshu said, then added, the organization I joined is transferring someone over to be my abilities instructor. 2 others will also be transferring in as teammates. The point is to build team synergy. 3 transfer students? Utaha stared at him, her expression gradually shifting. So, all your free time outside of classes is basically going to be monopolized by them. With a guiding instructor and 2 teammates for synergy training, what time would be left for actual astronomy club activities? Pretty much, Luoshu confirmed. He understood clearly that his spare time in school was going to be limited. Unless, of course, those 3 were brought into the club as well. Not into the real astronomy club, of course, but the fake one that served as their base of operations. In fact, that was likely the plan. Using the club to keep everyone close for mentoring and team building. But that also complicated things for the existing trio who knew the club's true nature. So basically, our club is about to be swarmed by 3 new transfer students, and Ariri and I have to play the part of normal students in front of these professionals. You think we can pull that off? Utaha paused mid-sentence, then realized. Wait, wasn't that just their actual identity? She and Ariri were normal students. Until just yesterday. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's not so bad. But how are you going to avoid exposing us accidentally? I got a handy little artifact last night that should make them overlook some blind spots. Also, in terms of intel gathering, what better target than a few professionals sent to keep tabs on you? Luoshu didn't mention the heart of the demon. It involved hypnosis, and given Utaha's brain, thoroughly contaminated by anime tropes, he could already imagine the sort of pervy ideas that would inspire. At that moment, Utaha muttered quietly, why does it feel like even just meeting you from now on will have to be some kind of secret rendezvous? Is there even a man on Earth capable of juggling 5 girls without any of them noticing the others? That's divine tier difficulty. What are you mumbling over there? Luoshu pretended not to hear and asked casually. Nothing, Utaha shook her head, then redirected the conversation. So, from now on, our real club activities will all be done in that alternate space at the base, right? Exactly, Luoshu nodded. Though I'll see if I can gradually bring those teammates over to our side. Oh? Utaha's expression suddenly sharpened. Don't tell me those 3 transfers are all girls. And beautiful main heroine types at that? Luoshu paused, then frowned. 2 of them are, and as for the instructor? I don't know yet. I see, Utaha smiled brightly. Seems like you've joined the right organization, dear God. Luoshu twitched slightly at her jab and gave his own forehead a quick pat before saying, the instructor's probably transferring in today. Help me keep an eye out for any new students. So, you're not being approached directly? You're supposed to find her yourself? What is this? Some kind of test? Utaha clicked her tongue but nodded. Alright, I'll keep an eye out. I'll message Ariri online later. Speaking of Ariri. Where is she? Luoshu looked around, realizing it was just the 2 of them. He clearly remembered messaging Ariri too. Asking to meet at the park. Utaha chuckled softly. Unlike us lonely loners, Sawamura-san is a hugely popular main heroine. She got dragged off by friends at school? Luoshu immediately caught on. Let me guess. She probably left with a deadpan face? Yeah. I didn't help her escape, Utaha said flatly, openly admitting she'd sold her teammate out. Those kinds of surface-level friendships are something she needs to resolve herself. You read the minds of Ariri's friends, didn't you? Luoshu immediately caught the reason for Utaha's cold detachment. Being the perfect classy daughter type isn't easy, huh? Checking his phone and seeing that class was about to start, Luoshu said, let's save the rest for lunch break. Oh? Utaha teased. So, are we going to school together now to keep spreading those juicy schoolyard rumors? Luoshu smirked. As a member of my Pantheon, shouldn't that be your choice? Utaha went speechless. This man. He really wouldn't suffer even the tiniest loss. Chapter 43, not a student, but a teacher. Early morning, just before the first class. As Luoshu arrived at his seat, he could feel the unusual gazes of his classmates following him. Ignoring them, he sat down and pulled out his phone, opening the line group chat. Several messages had already piled up. Harry, transfer student? I've heard nothing about that. There's been no buzz at all in the first-year classes. Maybe you got it wrong? Utaha, so that means there's no word about any transfer student among the first years? Harry, nothing in the second-year classes either. I just checked through a few classmates. That leaves only the third-year classes. Still uncertain. Harry, by the way, are we really confident we can keep everything secret in front of this so-called official ability instructor from that government group? Utaha, technically, this question shouldn't be mine to answer, but let's be honest here. Harry, you're the best performer among us, right? Utaha, am I wrong, my genius artist of the art club? The jewel of Toyosaki, Sawamura Spencer. Harry, ugh, you totally read my so-called friends' minds this morning, didn't you? I know you did. Utaha, I could have sworn I saw someone secretly grinning with joy. Just my imagination? Harry, so annoying. Angry emoji.jpg. After scanning through the conversation, Luoshu frowned slightly. He glanced at the classmates still watching him, and after scaring them off with a sharp stare, he muttered, "Isn't this usually when a bunch of classmates start gossiping about the new transfer student?" It might sound cliché, but in Japanese high schools, where reading the atmosphere was a required skill, making small talk about gossip-worthy topics was practically a daily ritual. And a transfer student? That was a hot topic that could last for days. There was a reason why so many light novels use transfer student arcs as a narrative hook. Unfortunately, Luoshu didn't get that kind of dramatic setup. Instead, thanks to the dating rumors sparked by his recent appearances with Kasamijoka Utaha, he had become the subject of gossip. He'd already overheard plenty of whispers like, "Are those two dating? And they must be." A lot of people saw them together. Thankfully, Toyosaki Academy students were decently well-mannered, so no one had directly walked up to him to confront him about it. Yet. Luoshu, if there's no intel on the transfer student, then I guess it's time to resort to off-the-record methods. Harry, what kind of off-the-record methods? Curious emoji.jpg. Utaha sent a long line of ellipses. She seemed to have an idea. Just then, Luoshu typed, "Luoshu, Utaha, try scouting the teacher's office after class." Harry, uh-oh. Kasumi, I'll give you an answer before the second period. Clearly, Utaha was confident. Seeing her reply, Luoshu tucked his phone into his pocket and thought, I should give her the upgrade materials for her ability soon. I'll say it's a reward for gathering intel. Of course, since I'm giving it in advance, she'll owe me some work for free later on. Naturally, he wasn't going to hand it over for free. This was like a chain quest in a game. Give an early reward to hook the player, but they still have to finish the remaining tasks to truly earn it. Utaha was smart, she'd understand the message. Just as Luoshu was planning his transaction, the bell rang for class. Even though it was supposed to be English, it was Takagi, the homeroom teacher for Japanese, who walked in. But what surprised everyone was who followed him. A girl in a black Gothic-style dress, with the petite figure of a middle schooler and doll-like long black hair. Luoshu blinked in surprise. Before he could even process it, the class erupted into chatter. What's going on? Is she a transfer student? We didn't hear anything about this. Whoa, she's super cute. Is she a middle schooler? She's way too small to be in high school. Damn, it's a legit legal loli whack whack. Takagi rapped the desk with a textbook. Quiet down. As the class slowly fell silent, Takagi looked around and explained, due to work reassignment, your regular English teacher, Nanjo-sensei, won't be teaching this semester. From now on, English will be taught by Natsuki-sensei. Everyone, give her a warm welcome. Without waiting for a reaction, Takagi began clapping enthusiastically on his own. The students, however, remained frozen, staring in disbelief at the adorable, doll-like girl. A teacher? You've gotta be kidding. While the class reeled in shock, Luoshu calmly pulled out his phone under the desk and typed a message. Luoshu, no need to check the teacher's office. She's in my class. You'll get all the details after this period. Not even glancing at the keyboard, he typed with eerie precision. Suddenly, his brow twitched as he realized Natsuki-sensei was looking directly at him. But it seemed to be just a casual glance. She said nothing and walked up to the board, writing for kanji in bold Natsuki Minamiya. Off to the side, she scribbled in small print, 24 years old. That's all. She tossed the chalk aside and clapped her hands together. Despite her childlike features, an overwhelming aura of authority radiated from her. Not going to explain much. Starting this semester, I'm your English teacher. Understood? The class exchanged bewildered looks, clearly unsure how to process her words. Luoshu sighed and called out, understood. Hearing him, Natsuki Minamiya glanced his way, and after that, the rest of the class half-heartedly echoed, understood. Takagi exhaled in relief. Looks like I'm no longer needed here. I'll leave this period to you, Natsuki-sensei. Fine, she replied with a nod, watching him leave. Once the door closed, she turned her sharp gaze on the class, silencing anyone who even thought about speaking. Open your textbooks to page 33. Now. The room fell into silence once again, broken only by the synchronized sound of pages turning. As Luoshu flipped his book, he narrowed his eyes and thought, the Witch of the Void. Natsuki Minamiya. So, another one from the abyss, huh? Chapter 44, Nonsensical Words Unbelievable. The rumors right after first period were actually true. There really is a Lilai teacher? On the rooftop, Ayuri held up a luxurious three-tiered bento box prepared by her mother, looking utterly baffled as she exclaimed. I thought that kind of character only appeared in Jinshai? Cough, cough. Realizing what she'd just let slip, and catching the stares from Luoshu and Kasumijoka Utaha, Ayuri immediately shut her mouth. Shoveling a mouthful of rice into her mouth, she quickly followed it up by grabbing a piece of cod tempura, chewing as she turned to Luoshu and asked, so, that Natsuki-sensei is the instructor assigned to guide you? But didn't you say this morning it was supposed to be a transfer student? Maybe there was a change of plans, Luoshu replied, holding a chicken sandwich he'd picked up from a convenience store on his way to the park earlier that morning. Kasumijoka glanced at the sandwich in his hand without saying anything, calmly placing her bento box down as she asked, is there a chance she's just a normal teacher? Highly unlikely, Luoshu said after a pause, his expression turning complicated. I actually know her. I can't say from where, but I do. Before he could continue, his eyes suddenly sharpened, gaze shifting toward the rooftop door. Standing silently by the stairway was the petite girl in a black gothic dress. The one who looked no older than a middle schooler. Oh? You recognize me? She said, a sly smile playing on her lips. Now that's interesting. Beside him, Ayuri choked mid-bite, thumping her chest with both hands as she frantically searched around. Luoshu, unbothered, picked up the bottle of oolong tea next to him and handed it over. Ayuri unscrewed the cap and downed a long gulp before exhaling loudly, I'm alive again. Then she shot Natsuki Minamiya a glare and snapped, what's the big idea, eavesdropping like that? You there, student. Use respectful language when addressing your teacher, Natsuki replied calmly. And I wasn't eavesdropping. I just happened to arrive and overheard a little. She stepped onto the rooftop and stopped 3 meters away, her gaze slowly sweeping across the 3 seated students. Ayuri, Luoshu, and Utaha. The 3 of them were sitting quite close on a long bench. 1 boy, 2 girls. A setup that could easily be misinterpreted. A boy flanked by 2 girls, on the rooftop no less. Luoshu-kun, you're surprisingly popular, huh? Without missing a beat, Luoshu stuffed the last of his sandwich into his mouth, wiped his hands and lips with a tissue, and stood up. Do you have time to talk somewhere more private? Natsuki gave him a brief look, then nodded. There's a turn at the stairwell that leads up here. Follow me. Got it. Luoshu nodded at Utaha and Ayuri, then quickly followed her. What's with her? Ayuri muttered, nervously shrinking back. She couldn't shake the feeling that the teacher might have overheard her earlier comment. Especially the part where she mentioned that Luoshu was being assigned a mentor. If so, that meant she'd just leaked classified info. Not good. She glanced over at Utaha, hoping for reassurance, only to find the latter wearing a grim expression. Hey, Kasumijoka. Huh? What's with that face? Utaha's tone was low and serious. I didn't hear her footsteps at all when she came up. Ayuri froze. The turn in the staircase that led to the rooftop was located on the 5th floor. Since the rooftop wasn't directly connected to the stairwell, this space was often used as storage. It was here that Luoshu and Natsuki now stood, facing off. For a long half-minute, neither of them spoke. Then Natsuki curled her lips into a smile. Not bad. You noticed me the moment I arrived on the rooftop. You let that happen on purpose, didn't you? Luoshu replied evenly. Maybe. But being able to notice me still isn't something just anyone can do, she said with a light laugh, one hand on her hip. I can see why that woman. Garakita suspects you're a mental type Esper. She paused, then gave him a cryptic look. Though, according to Chisato Nishikigi, you're a wind warlock, right? Luoshu smirked. How much do you actually know? Natsuki wasn't fazed by the question. She answered directly, other than the basics, not much. Just that you recently started a club at school. Are you here in the flesh or is this a soul descent? Owoshu blinked, surprised. There's a difference between physical descent and spiritual possession for people coming from the abyss. There's also the reincarnation type, Natsuki added offhandedly, carefully watching his reaction. But only big shots can pull those off. Now Owoshu finally understood the misunderstanding and let out a soft laugh. You think I'm one of those big shots? Yep. I actually do, she said without hesitation. Owoshu's expression stiffened. But before he could reply, Natsuki continued, still, whatever secrets you're hiding, that's SDS's problem. I'm just a temporary instructor, so it's none of my concern. As ordered by that woman, I'll be teaching you the basic foundations of mysticism in this world. Mysticism basics, huh? Owoshu's tone hinted at skepticism. He knew that Natsuki Minamiya was likely a specialist in spatial sorcery, and based on what he knew about the world she came from, their magic system was relatively well developed. But it didn't seem like she had any intention of teaching him advanced skills. You're a half-baked rookie. Don't get ahead of yourself. Learn the basics properly first, she scoffed. Then she walked past him, ready to leave. After a few steps, she paused and added, oh, and I plan to take over as your club advisor. Barring any changes, I'll be in the clubroom from 4 to 6 p.m. on school days to tutor you. And your 2 little girlfriends can sit in if they want, but I'm not acknowledging them as my students. Of course, if you'd rather not involve them, you'd better make that decision soon. Because sometimes, knowing the truth is far worse than staying ignorant. Leaving behind that cryptic message, Natsuki Minamiya walked away without looking back. Owoshu remained where he stood, lips gradually curling into a smile. A smile not unlike Light Yagami's, the kind that screamed, everything is going according to plan. Chapter 45, all according to plan. After Natsuki Minamiya left, Owoshu revealed a subtly amused smile. As expected, spending 5,000 points to temporarily enhance that bracelet was worth it. Even someone of hero rank like her couldn't see through it right away. He confirmed this not by her reaction to him, but by the fact that neither Kazumijouka Utaha nor Ariri had their abilities exposed. That alone was proof enough. That would mean Natsuki Minamiya probably hasn't reached the demigod level. Hero rank, maybe? Or just elite? Most likely hero rank. He tilted his head thoughtfully. If she really is the same void witch capable of contending with a primogenitor-level vampire. Owoshu wasn't surprised about her strength, as Natsuki Minamiya was a witch who could contend with primogenitor of vampires. If anything, he was more shocked that such a person would be his teacher. To bring in someone of her caliber, Chief Takobane must have pulled some serious strings. Though Natsuki's tone hadn't been especially friendly, Owoshu, who knew who she really was, understood better than most that she took her role as a teacher seriously, perhaps to an obsessive degree. That was precisely why he wasn't too worried even if Utaha and Ariri had been discovered. He instinctively prepared a few safeguards anyway, enhancing the bracelet's concealment power and purposefully acting overly familiar with both girls. After all, in Japanese high schools, 3 students, 1 boy and 2 girls, having lunch together on the rooftop practically screamed love triangle. His casual closeness with them was an intentional mislead. People wouldn't think classmates. They'd assume dating. And with his identity as a warlock combined with his relatively young age, it was easy to make him look like a two-timing playboy. Owoshu suspected that someone like Natsuki, who took her duties seriously, would instinctively want to correct students with poor moral foundations. And a teacher like her would naturally pay extra attention to students' romantic entanglements. That, in fact, was the exact reason he'd invited Utaha and Ariri to have lunch with him on the rooftop today. To make Natsuki misunderstand. To drag the 2 girls into her attention and into her awareness. Better that than letting them get unexpectedly exposed in a far worse situation down the line. As the saying goes, the dangerous part of the iceberg isn't the part you can see. It's the part below the surface. By letting Natsuki believe Utaha and Ariri were simply his girlfriends, he could better hide their real secrets. In her mind, I'm probably the kind of guy who got a taste of power and instantly started building a harem. A scumbag dragging 2 innocent girlfriends into a dangerous world they know nothing about. Which is why she gave that veiled warning. Either come clean with the more cut ties, she's surprisingly considerate. Recalling Natsuki's final remarks before leaving, Owoshu's expression became complicated. Like a fox who'd successfully stolen a chicken and was still savoring its cunning. People in love tend to let things slip. That's probably what she thinks. So, she just assumed Utaha and Ariri are aware to some extent. And what had convinced her most wasn't just the setup. It was the power of his lucky wallet. Luoshu silently pulled the faded wallet from his pocket, opened it, and looked down at the shattered remnants of a 100 yen coin, now in 4 pieces, along with a vanished stack of 10,000 yen bills. About 30 of them. He winced. Triggering one forced luck event cost that much? Damn, that stings. But at least the goal was achieved. Yes, it was the wallet's ability. Enhanced by a one-time demigod tier luck boost. That made Natsuki believe his performance. That was what swayed her. Thanks to his special status, Luoshu could forcibly activate certain abyssal artifacts' powers once, bypassing their usual costs. Provided he bore the consequences afterward. He had confirmed this with both the system and the artifact itself. Still, the price was steep. First, he had to pay an additional cost after using it. Second, the artifact had to be fed with something of value. This time, it had taken a hefty sum of cash and a 3,000 point item. An ancient snake's shed skin. To satisfy the lucky wallet. With that, he made the implausible seem plausible. It worked. But it was expensive. Whether in terms of money or points, the cost of activating this shortcut was always painfully high. Shaking his head, Luoshu stepped out from the stairwell corner unspotted Kasamijoka Utaha and Ariri waiting further down. He greeted them with a sly grin. Good news. Looks like the astronomy club just scored a top-tier teacher. For free. Today, they kept their status a secret while receiving instruction in private. Tomorrow, they'd begin spreading false information on purpose. The day after that, they'd bring Natsuki into the club officially. In a way, Luoshu was carefully maneuvering Natsuki Minami onto the chessboard. Piece by piece, step by step. Kasamijoka, who was aware of the plan, gave Luoshu a slightly exasperated look. So, you went through all that just so we could study magic under her without being suspected? Isn't that too much of a sacrifice? But Luoshu simply shook his head. No. The main purpose was to give us a strong ally. Just in case. Don't be fooled by how small and cute she looks. Right now, she's probably the most powerful mage I've met. If you say so, Utaha replied with a faintly skeptical expression that said, well, if you insist, I'll believe you. Ariri looked back and forth between the two, confused by their reactions. Her eyebrows twitched, and she pouted. Here we go again. That feeling where I'm the only one being left out. You're not being excluded. Luoshu turned to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. To put it simply, because of a few small tricks on my end, Natsuki Minamiya is now going to be our instructor in mysticism. And also the astronomy club's official advisor. He paused, then added, and if something serious ever happens, something I alone can't handle, you'll have someone besides me to rely on. Even though only 2 days had passed since his arrival in this world, Luoshu had already formed the habit of preparing contingencies. Securing allies now was better than waiting until he was cornered with no escape. Because Luoshu was not the type to walk into a dead end without a plan. Just then. Ding dong. The long chime of the warning bell for the next class echoed through the school. Luoshu glanced at the windows, then turned to the 2 girls in front of him. In short, just treat Natsuki like a real teacher. Don't worry about anything else. And don't forget. After school, astronomy club meeting. Got it? Kasamijoka nodded slightly. I'll be there as soon as I can, Ariri nodded firmly. And with that, the 3 parted ways at the stairwell, each heading back to class. Chapter 46, The Common Sense of an Uncommon World. 3rd floor, Astronomy Club Activity Room. The golden rays of the setting sun filtered through the curtains, casting scattered patches of light across the room. A girl in a black gothic dress, one who looked nothing like a teacher, appeared at the doorway. Natsuki Minamiya raised her hand, and with a click, the fluorescent lights flickered on, filling the room with bright, sterile white light. After switching on the lights, she turned to look inside the classroom. Her gaze fell upon the 3 figures seated at the desks, spaced a meter apart, Luoshu, Kasamijoka Utaha, and Ariri Spencer Sawamura. Her eyes moved slowly across each of their faces. I thought I was here to tutor 1 student, she said flatly, but now it's turned into triple the workload. She muttered under her breath, I brought this on myself, but still. What an irritating tutoring session. With that, she walked over to the podium and opened the bag she had brought with her. From inside, she pulled out 3 small transparent glass bottles. The brownish liquid inside sloshed lightly with her movements. Before we start with the lessons, I want to assess just how much you understand about this world's so-called common sense, she said. Ariri and Kasamijoka blinked at the same time, then turned in perfect unison to look at Luoshu seated in the center. Under their expectant stares, Luoshu replied with a complicated expression, Natsuki-chan, you should probably treat all of us like we're complete beginners. Don't call me Chan like that, Natsuki instinctively shot back with a frown. After eyeing Luoshu for a second, she added, Now I'm starting to believe you really do know me. Only the disobedient students from her original world would ever dare add a Chan to her name like that. The familiar nickname stirred something nostalgic in her. Fine, she sighed. In that case, I'll assume you're total newcomers and start from scratch. She placed the 3 mysterious bottles down in front of them and announced, since you're beginners, your first lesson will be learning how to identify danger. Turning to face them seriously, she continued, from now on, I'll be using the theory system of Eastern warlocks to explain this concept. Apply the oil from the bottle to your eyelids, then close your eyes. Without hesitation, Luoshu opened the bottle, dabbed some of the oil onto his fingertip, and rubbed it across his eyelids. As he shut his eyes, he felt an immediate cooling sensation. It reminded him of applying medicated balm. Kasamijoka and Ariri followed his example, applying the oil and closing their eyes. Now, concentrate your focus on your eyes, Natsuki instructed. As if you're trying really hard to see a distant blackboard through closed lids. Channel your willpower that way. Luoshu furrowed his brow. His eyeballs pressed tightly behind his lids, straining under the mental effort. Okay, now slowly open your eyes. Bit by bit, she guided. As Luoshu gradually opened his eyes, he saw something strange about Natsuki Minamiya standing at the podium. From his current perspective, he could see faint flames quietly flickering on her body. Red on her left shoulder, yellow on her right, and blue hovering above her head. What do you see? Natsuki asked, now holding a pointer stick. She gestured toward the top of her head. Blue flame, Luoshu answered softly. There are 3 flames, Kasamijoka added. You're referring to the blue one above her head? Same here, Ariri mumbled, unsure how else to contribute. Good. Looks like the first step in spiritual sight was a success. Hold on to that feeling and that vision, Natsuki said firmly. This is a basic and necessary skill for any warlock. She pointed at the flames on her shoulders and head with her pointer as she explained, in Eastern traditions, it's said the human body holds 3 treasures, essence, energy, and spirit. Essence refers to the physical foundation. Everything that keeps the body alive. It represents the material aspect and points directly to the flesh. Energy refers to the life force that flows through the body and harmonizes its functions. You can think of it as vitality. Spirit is your mind, awareness, consciousness. Essentially, your soul. In terms of spiritual sight, the red flame on the left shoulder represents essence, the yellow on the right is energy, and the blue flame above the head is spirit. These aren't literal flames, she clarified. What you're seeing is spiritual light. The glow of these 3 forces from the body under a heightened perception. When all 3 flames are visible and burning steadily, it indicates a person is in good health. Natsuki stepped up to the blackboard and drew a diagram of a human body with chalk. A dim red flame means physical damage. A dim blue one means mental or emotional damage. And if the yellow one's flickering or dull, it means your body is becoming weak or drained. Most of the dangers you'll face can be understood by observing these flames. She tapped the yellow flame on her right shoulder with the pointer and gave a particular warning. If the yellow flame starts flickering or fading, it usually means a spirit or creature is draining your life force. If the blue flame wavers, it's a sign your mind is being influenced or disturbed. This often results in hallucinations. So, if you see strange things under spiritual sight, be cautious. They might all be illusions. Then she tapped the blue flame above her head. If the blue flame dims, it means your mind is under attack. This is the most dangerous scenario. Enemies who do this usually intend to kill. And if your blue flame keeps shrinking, something may be draining your spirit. Possibly a parasitic entity or an ominous environment. Ever watched horror films like The Grudge or Sadako? If those ghosts existed, their attacks would probably come through the blue flame. Hurting your mind and spirit. Ariri instinctively shuddered. She glanced up and saw that her blue flame was about the size of a fist and burning steadily. Phew. Still okay. Natsuki continued the lesson. If the red flame dims or flickers, it's physical damage. Stab wounds, bullet wounds, or even internal illnesses will all show up in the red flame. She took a sip from the thermos cup of coffee she'd brought and looked down at her 3 students absorbing the information. Any questions? Luoshu was quiet for a few seconds, then raised his hand. What if more than one flame is flickering? Maybe even all 3? Natsuki froze mid-sip, her thermos hovering in the air. Then she gave him a sympathetic smile. In that case, let me congratulate you. Congratulations on encountering the abyss. Chapter 47, The 3 Fires of Essence, Energy, and Spirit. Congratulations on encountering the abyss. Luoshu repeated those words a few times, frowning slightly before asking, so when all 3 fires show abnormalities, does it mean we've encountered an abyssal artifact? Not necessarily. Or rather, it's not always an artifact, Natsuki replied calmly as she closed her thermos and leaned against the podium. It could be that you were influenced or controlled by an abyssal item. Or perhaps you've stepped into a place tainted by abyssal energy or even come under attack by an abyssal creature. Any of these situations could cause all three fires to react abnormally. When a large number of ordinary people exhibit simultaneous abnormalities in their three fires, that's practically the clearest sign that an abyss is starting to descend. She paused before continuing, and such occurrences have been growing more frequent in recent years. That's precisely why the SDS was founded. Glancing at Luoshu, she added pointedly, "You brought these two girls here to learn so they'd have a bit of power to protect themselves, didn't you?" Luoshu didn't deny it. After all, that was exactly the conclusion he had wanted her to draw. To avoid monsters or objects that come from the abyss. Or just weird and dangerous things in general. Learning the basics of spiritual sight and how to observe the states of essence, energy, and spirit is the best way to detect danger, she explained. That was the reasoning behind making this their very first lesson. With a warning tone, she added, "And just so you know, in this world, most normal people can only inflict damage to the red fire. Some ability users are the same. Those who can hurt the blue fire are usually strong. Very strong. As for the yellow fire, well, that one's a favorite among all kinds of supernatural beings." Kasumijoka Utaha raised her hand with a slightly awkward look, recalling something from a few days ago. "When you say supernatural beings, do you mean?" "Exactly what you think," Natsuki said with a half-smile. "Ghosts, demons, yokai. Things like that. To them, the life force of humans, or any living being, is nothing short of nourishment." She gave Kasumijoka a teasing look and added, "Of course, some powerful non-human entities can damage the blue fire as well. Those aren't your average threats. You'd need top-tier experts to deal with them. There's also a special case," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "It only occurs in males." And all three fires shake at once. That made Luoshu and Kasumijoka both tense. Only Ariri looked confused, blinking blankly before stepping right into the pitfall. "Huh? What kind of situation is that? Why would it only happen to guys? Doesn't it happen to women too?" "Of course it does," Natsuki said blandly. "For men, it happens during ejaculation. As for women, well, that would occur during certain procedures in an obgyn operating room. That's a version of the three-fire disturbance that only happens to females. If Ariri had been drinking something, she would have spit it all out on the spot." "Wait. How can you just say something like that so casually?" Face burning red, Ariri slapped the table in embarrassment and frustration. "I'm 24, Natsuki replied coolly, casting her a look that resembled how an adult might view a flustered child. "In this country, that's usually old enough to be a mother. Talking about this is completely normal. But still." Ariri was now stumbling over her words, but Natsuki simply waved her off without concern. "Alright, that's enough about the three fires. Using spiritual sight, whether on yourself or others, can let you easily determine someone's current state." She glanced at Luoshu for a moment, then addressed all three of them. "Let me teach you another method to identify danger." She pointed at the yellow flame on her right shoulder. Normally, a person's yellow fire is always burning. If someone is extremely fatigued, their yellow fire may start flickering. Like it's pulsing. And if it can flicker, it can also become still. As she spoke, the yellow flame on her shoulder went from burning strongly to flickering, and then finally stilled. Becoming a motionless, glowing mass in the shape of a flame. Natsuki narrowed her eyes slightly and said meaningfully, "In modern society, it's rare to see such a stable flame. A stable yellow fire indicates stable life force. That's a marker unique to warlocks." She looked directly at Kasumijoka and Ariri. "Among you three, aside from Luoshu, if you encounter someone whose yellow fire isn't moving at all, run. Just run." A steady yellow fire meant their life force was completely under control. In other words, they already awakened their abilities. Or, to flip it, only someone with stable yellow fire could awaken abilities. So, if you saw someone with an unmoving yellow fire on their right shoulder, chances are you were looking at a warlock. After issuing this warning, Natsuki looked back at Luoshu and added, "The same applies to the blue fire. Those with stable spirit flames are even more dangerous. But since people who've mastered the divine flame can disguise their three fires, it's usually much harder to detect any abnormalities in them." As she said this, the flames on her head and shoulders instantly became perfectly steady, as if they'd been digitally rendered and pasted on. Seeing this, Luoshu narrowed his eyes. He looked up at his own three fires. After 2 or 3 seconds, he finally saw one of the flames flicker slightly. This method is pretty convenient. But that aside, Natsuki-chan, how many people actually know how to use this technique? This is my personal invention, Natsuki replied nonchalantly, sipping from her thermos with her eyes half open. And again. Don't add apostrophe Chen when addressing your teacher. But you're not that old, right? And didn't you say before that you'd be acting in a student role anyway? Clink clink clink. Suddenly, the clattering of metal echoed through the room. Chains had materialized out of nowhere, wrapping around Luoshu's wrists and ankles. Natsuki gritted her teeth, visibly annoyed. That was the government's mistake. They assumed I was a student just from a photo. Humphrey. If you ask me, every single official in Kyoto's personnel department should be fired. After hearing that, Luoshu promptly shut his mouth. So, it was a bureaucratic error. No wonder she's so pissed off. PFFT. Ayuri couldn't hold back her laughter. Her shoulders shook as she tried to suppress it. Sorry. I didn't mean to, it's just. I didn't think you'd end up in the same situation as me. Wait, no. I really am a student. Wait. Sawamura-san, Kasamijoka quickly warned, glancing nervously at Natsuki's darkening expression. Maybe you should stop talking now. Ayuri looked up at Natsuki's increasingly stormy expression and immediately clamped her hands over her mouth. In a cold tone, Natsuki said, your homework is to practice spiritual sight without relying on the essential oil. The bottle on your desk is your only tool. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll be inspecting your progress. She then fixed Ayuri with a flat, unreadable look. I expect all three of you to be ready to hand in your assignments. Homework. And it's obviously aimed at me? Is it too late to apologize on my knees right now? Ayuri thought, despair flooding her face. Having successfully laid a small trap for the trio, Natsuki suddenly turned to Luoshu and said, Luoshu, come with me to Lycurus after class. Surprised, Luoshu blinked but nodded. Okay. Chapter 48, Classification of Abyssal Artifacts at the private Toyosaki Academy. Luoshu once again found himself the subject of countless envious stares as he walked behind Natsuki Minamiya. With his recently enhanced senses, he could clearly hear whispers filled with jealousy and disbelief. First it was that Junior Kasamijoka, and now even the new substitute teacher Natsuki-sensei. Seriously? He's just some delinquent in third year. Damn, I'm so jealous. Why would Natsuki-sensei be with that notorious third-year transfer student? Just let him rot alone. She just started teaching and is already getting involved with that guy? Is this legal? Will I really going to be taken down by him? Luoshu glanced at the petite figure of Natsuki walking ahead of him, and for a moment, he felt like he was being led along by a younger sister. Of course, he didn't actually have a sister. Not in this life or the previous one. I heard that back when you entered high school, you were isolated by your classmates for being a transfer student, and then you beat them up. You even called some friends from Chinatown to ambush someone off campus? Natsuki, walking ahead, recited his past like she'd memorized it. Speaking of which, those Chinatown friends of yours, weren't they people from your hometown who got involved in gangs after moving here? Luoshu didn't deny it. Instead, he responded calmly, when you're away from home, you rely on friends. When you're abroad, you rely on folks from the same region. Pretty normal stuff. Provided those folks aren't the backstabbing kind. In truth, the ones most likely to take advantage of fellow countrymen abroad were often fellow countrymen themselves. You never really knew from which dynasty some of them had immigrated. There were still quite a few descendants of the Qing dynasty out there. Even some from the Ming. Because of that, Luoshu generally avoided contact with other Chinese unless necessary. The only reason he managed to get help back then was because his previous self's parents had been executives working overseas for a major company based in their Fujian hometown. In places like that, businesses and gangs often had some ambiguous ties. So, it wasn't surprising that Luoshu knew a few men of the world. Thanks to that small act of calling in backup to block someone outside school during his first year, Luoshu successfully earned the title of Toyosaki Academy's #1 dangerous student. And in doing so, he also managed to avoid Japan's notorious bullying culture. In a way, even before regaining his past memories, the old Luoshu had understood the concept of sacrifice and gain. It must have been hard, being all alone in a foreign country, Natsuki said from ahead, her back still to him. Luoshu smiled, unfazed. Are you talking about yourself, Natsuki-chan? She paused for a second before walking again and smoothly changed the subject. I heard you've come into possession of an abyssal artifact. Have you had its danger level assessed? Assessed? Danger level? Luoshu put on a confused look. Not entirely fake, though, since he truly wasn't sure what she meant by danger classification. Noticing his reaction, Natsuki explained, to put it simply, it's a classification system created by various special departments across nations to categorize the danger levels of abyssal artifacts. She continued walking while explaining in a low voice, Level 1 is safe for use. Classified as safe grade. The abilities in this tier are often bizarre and unpredictable, but the good news is they're harmless with minimal side effects. These are the kind of abyssal items you can use regularly. Level 2 is partially usable but requires supervision. It's dangerous enough to cause large-scale casualties if misused. Level 3 is strictly prohibited from use and must be stored securely. These have the potential to cause citywide devastation. Level 4 is absolutely forbidden. Not to be touched or studied. Only heads of state are permitted to know of their existence. Even then, only the UN's 5 permanent members are given the registration numbers. That's the highest known classification. As she finished speaking, her eyes drifted toward the ruby ring on Luoshu's right hand. An object no one else had noticed. Based on what the 7-star demon hunter revealed yesterday. Though that was clearly a deliberate leak. The heart of the demon on your finger is likely a level 2 abyssal artifact. Deliberate leak? And how would you know that? Luoshu frowned slightly and looked at Natsuki with interest. So, you were the one who drove off that 7-star demon hunter yesterday, weren't you, Natsuki-chan? How many times do I have to tell you? Stop adding '-chan to my name. She glared at him and snapped, unless you want me to start spreading rumors that the item on your hand is a fake, you'd better start calling me Natsuki-sensei. Got it? Luoshu, unbothered and full of mischief, replied, okay, Natsuki-chan. Got it, Natsuki-chan. Her eyes sharpened like daggers. Besides, we're off campus right now, Natsuki-chan, he added, implying that he'd behave properly at school. She seemed to get what he meant and scoffed, off campus or not, you will address me as sensei. Understand? Yes, Luoshu replied quickly. Then, feigning confusion, he glanced down at the ring on his hand. But wait. You said this is a fake? Natsuki turned to look at him seriously, seemingly gauging whether he was lying. Oh, and by the way, she added casually, when someone lies, the spiritual flame of the mind. The blue fire. Trembles slightly. Really? Luoshu put on a shocked expression, even though the blue flame atop his head didn't so much as flicker. Seeing the unwavering flame above his head, Natsuki let out a soft chuckle and said with amusement, a genius, huh? Alright, let's not dawdle, she said briskly. Unless you want your superior to chew you out, you'd better follow me. Luoshu didn't hesitate and quickly caught up to Natsuki as they ducked into a side alley and headed straight for the Licorice Cafe. Dingling. The door chimed brightly as they entered, the wind chime hanging by the frame ringing sweetly. Sorry, we're closed, Toda. Oh, it's Luoshu? A girl in a deep crimson kimono holding a broom greeted them. It was Chisato Nishikigi. Her apology turned into curiosity the moment she saw who had entered. Did you get the message too? She asked, tilting her head. What message? Luoshu stepped in and gave Chisato a puzzled look, clearly out of the loop. Before she could reply, Natsuki calmly spoke from behind him, your chief Takabana wouldn't let you start working just yet. Then she glanced over at Chisato and said, you look healthy, Chisato. Ah. Natsuki-chan. Chisato's eyes lit up the moment she saw her. She rushed over and hugged her tightly. So, you're the teacher the boss lady found for Luoshu. Wow. Yes, it's me, Natsuki replied as she subtly tried to pry herself free. Alright, don't cling too hard. Standing on tiptoe is tiring. Watching the scene unfold, Luoshu turned to Inoue Takina, who was holding a feather duster nearby, and asked curiously, they know each other. Takina explained, back when we first got here, it was Director Takabana and Natsuki-sensei who led the response unit. But after some disputes between Director Takabana and the MPD, they haven't worked together since. She paused, then added, it's been about half a year, give or take. Luoshu's expression turned subtle. What a twist of fate. Oblivious to his expression, Natsuki finally slipped out of Chisato's embrace and turned her attention to someone familiar in the back, preparing coffee. So, Garakia Takabana, Natsuki called toward the back kitchen, what's the situation now? What situation are you asking about? Takabana replied with a bright smile as she picked up a coffee cup. Natsuki's gaze sharpened as she studied her closely. That file. Recorded with demonic incantations and sent away by the now-dead demon warlock. Where exactly was it sent? Chapter 49, You Are My Lucky Goddess. What are demonic incantations? Luoshu asked in a low voice, glancing toward Inoue Takina as Natsuki Minamiya and Garakia Takabana stared each other down in silent tension. Takina turned to look at him and thought for a moment before explaining. Demonic incantations refer to special symbols or characters that appear on various objects. They're a type of script-based power used by demons and demon warlocks, and they're extremely dangerous. In most cases, any object inscribed with demonic script has a danger level of grade 2 or higher. After explaining, Takina suddenly remembered something and asked, "Wait. Do you know about danger grades?" "Natsuki-chan mentioned them to me on the way here," Luoshu replied, finally understanding why she had taken the time to explain the classification system of abyssal artifacts earlier. Still, something felt off. The danger levels seemed a bit different from the system-defined rankings he was familiar with. For example, the Grade 2 abyssal artifact Heart of the Demon was classified as an elite tier item by the system. That would mean Grade 1 artifacts must include both normal and excellent tiers? As Luoshu pondered how these ratings might correspond, Garuka Kabana walked out carrying a tray of coffee and called to Mika behind the bar, "Mika, bring it out." "Got it," the dark-skinned man behind the counter responded. He reached into a cabinet and pulled out several envelopes, which Garuka took with a smile. "Why don't we take a seat over there?" she suggested cheerfully, waving the envelopes toward Natsuki. Natsuki frowned at her but began walking toward a long table, muttering, "You're as troublesome as ever." "I'll take that as a compliment," Garuka replied, following after her. Then she looked back and called out to Luoshu, Chisato, and Takina, "You three come along too." Luoshu and Takina exchanged a look and moved to follow. Meanwhile, Chisato casually folded her arms behind her head and sighed with practiced ease, "Looks like it's work time again." "More accurately, a continuation of our last job," Garuka clarified as she set the envelopes on the table and took a seat. She looked toward Luoshu as he sat down, then said with a smile, "By the way, the biggest credit for this one goes to you, Luoshu." "Me?" Luoshu raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. But then Garuka elaborated, "Thanks to you killing that demon hunter's hound, I was able to extract some useful intel from its brain. That led us to the jewelry store clerk who had been hypnotized by the demon warlock." At that, Luoshu's memory clicked. Of course. It happened just yesterday, so it was still fresh in his mind. As he understood it, the whole incident began when a warlock from the secret organization True Celestial Astronomy illegally crossed borders, only to be ambushed by a 7-star demon hunter from the equally secretive demon hunters. After a fierce clash, the warlock was fatally wounded. Before dying, he used the very heart of the demon now in Luoshu's possession to hypnotize a jewelry store clerk and handed off all of his possessions to her. That clerk then sold the heart of the demon to the jewelry store owner, Myra Tsubakahara, who in turn became the target of the demon hunter's tracking hound. Later, as Myra was returning home, she sought help from her neighbor, Luoshu, which ultimately led to him killing the hound. Now it all made sense. So, among the items transferred by that clerk, one included demonic incantations? Not just one. A whole bunch, Garuka said as she laid out the 10 envelopes one by one on the table. Resting her chin on one hand, she looked toward Natsuki with a bright smile. Each of these 10 envelopes contains information on a separate location where one of the warlock's files was sent. And each could potentially hold demonic incantations. So then, Natsuki, which one do you want? You're quite capable, Garuka, Natsuki said with arms folded, her face stark and unamused. You beat the MPD and the Onmyoji agency to the hypnotized store clerk, seized all the surveillance footage from the jewelry shop and the clerk's route, leaving my team with nothing. And now you want to trade with me using these? You're as greedy as ever. So that's what happened. Luoshu finally understood the reason behind Garuka's smug smile. From what he could gather, the entire situation had been under the watch of the MPD from the beginning. Most likely, they had planned to use the 7-star demon hunter to eliminate the demon warlock and sweep up both parties in one go, like a mantis hunting the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. But the demon hunter had clearly sensed their intentions. Instead of finishing off the warlock, he merely crippled him, allowing the warlock to distribute his abyssal artifacts before death and throw the MPD's plans into chaos. Now the police had to deal with both the hunter and the scattered artifacts, putting them under intense pressure. Enter Garuka Kabana. Capitalizing on Luoshu's unexpected victory, and with the police and the hunter deadlocked, she swooped in and nabbed the warlock's hidden stash of treasures. The classic oriole to the mantis and cicada. Now, with Natsuki, who had gone to great lengths to personally deal with the demon hunter. Standing right in front of her, Garuka divided the bounty, minus the heart of the demon, into 10 shares and proposed a trade. A brilliant move, no doubt. Wait a second. Last night when Garuka walked him home, she dropped her lucky wallet. Though she never retrieved it, it was Luoshu who helped determine its location. So, could this be another stroke of luck because of him? That would explain why someone like Garuka kept stumbling into such prime opportunities. She had a cheat code. The clerk split the files containing demonic incantations into 10 separate packages, sent them to different addresses, and then committed suicide, Garuka explained calmly. But thankfully, we managed to recover all of them. And out of goodwill. Natsuki, I'll do a 70-30 split with you. She smiled warmly at the blank-faced Natsuki, as if she were being generous for an old friend's sake. You get 70 and I get 30? Natsuki said sarcastically. If you insist, I'm willing to accept that. Geruka's smile only widened. Natsuki narrowed her eyes. 50-50. 60-40, final offer. I'll take 40, but I get first pick, Geruka countered, her expression full of hidden meaning. Even if we can't be sure which of the 10 has the suspected grade 3 artifact, you know better than anyone that our side is better suited to sealing abyssal items than the police. Natsuki stared at her for a long moment, then finally relented. Fine. But the addresses have to be chosen at random. Deal. Geruka agreed without hesitation. She gathered the 10 envelopes and quickly shuffled them. Then she turned to Luoshu and said, Luoshu, you draw one. His expression froze instantly. But Geruka looked at him with complete trust. Don't be nervous. Just pick whichever one feels right. After all, you are my lucky goddess. I'm not nervous, Luoshu grumbled internally. I'm just annoyed at how wicked this woman is. She knows I've got absurd luck and still asks me to draw. But after a brief pause, he reached out toward the envelopes. Chapter 50, The Villainous Geruka Cabana. Without much thought, Luoshu quickly drew 4 envelopes from the 10 in Geruka Cabana's hand. As soon as the 4 were chosen, Geruka, grinning unabashedly, handed the remaining 6 to Natsuki-sensei. Here you go, Inspector Natsuki, she said with exaggerated cheer. Now you've got something to report back to your buddies at the Metropolitan Police Department. Hearing that, Natsuki cast her a sharp look and immediately understood the implication hidden in her words. Actions like this will only make things more difficult for you at the MPD, Natsuki said bluntly. Though a warning, there was genuine concern behind her words. As a friend, she didn't want Geruka to completely burn her bridges with the upper ranks of the force. But Geruka showed no intention of backing down. And aligning myself with those parasites will somehow help us resist the abyss. She scoffed. Peacekeeping doesn't mean groveling, Natsuki. Groveling, huh? Maybe, Natsuki replied with an ambiguous tone. She said no more and simply accepted the 6 envelopes. Standing up, she gave Geruka a final glance and said, before you make your move, let me give you one last piece of advice. Don't underestimate the hidden organizations. They may not take this loss quietly. Geruka only smiled in response. Well, we'll see how sharp their claws really are. Natsuki left without another word, and the old wooden door gave a faint creak as it closed behind her. Only once she was gone did Chisato Nishikigi exhale in relief, patting her chest. Phew. I thought she was going to wipe us out right then and there. Luoshu, who had still been puzzling over the look Natsuki gave him before leaving, was now full of question marks. She's really that scary? Honestly, Luoshu had always thought Natsuki-sensei was pretty mild. Just a little sharp-tongued at worst. She's not that bad, Takina Inoue agreed with him, nodding. Chisato's exaggerating. At most, she'd just hang you upside down with her chains. Hang you up? Luoshu immediately reevaluated his opinion. Okay, maybe she is kind of scary. Phew. Geruka, now relaxing on the sofa, stretched lazily with a relieved sigh. Good thing Natsuki-chan wasn't angry, or this would have gone sideways fast. If you're scared, why do you still act like this? Luoshu couldn't help but ask. Geruka smirked and waved the 4 envelopes in her hand like fans. Letting go of meat that's already in your mouth? Not a chance. These things are at least level 2 abyssal artifacts, possibly even a level 3 among them. I don't know why that demon warlock brought so much treasure to Japan, but since it ended up in my lap, there's no way I'm just letting it go. She looked around at the group gathered and issued instructions smoothly. Chisato, you and I are one team. Mika, you and Mizuki take a route. Luoshu, you're paired with Takina. Takina, guide him through things. Let's clear these 4 locations in one sweep. Got it. Chisato had no objections to the arrangement. So, Geruka, I guess Kurami is on Overwatch again? She's already monitoring all the target locations, Geruka answered directly. The MPD's intel can still be useful to us now and then, so we should know exactly what they've got. Luoshu rolled his eyes. You really don't hold back, huh? Screwing them over and still making use of their resources? Geruka really was doing all the villainous things imaginable. This is just efficient resource use, Takina said coolly, clearly on Geruka's side. The higher-ups at the MPD are notoriously slow in disaster response. Chisato chuckled and patted Takina's shoulder. Hey, don't say it like that. The lower ranks still do their jobs well. But they don't have decision-making power, Mika interjected calmly while polishing a glass. And it's the leadership who actually call the shots. Alright, enough chatter. Let's move. Geruka clapped her hands and stood up, her voice now sharp with command. Triple check your uniforms and weapons. Make sure your micro cameras are in place and stay in constant contact with Kurumi. If you run into something you can't handle, prioritize your own safety. I don't want to be visiting shrines every year to honor you all. Understood? Understood. Everyone responded in unison. With that, they filed into the kitchen and toward the underground prep room. Everyone except Luoshu. Hey Mika, where's the key to the Ferrari? Garika called over her shoulder. 6th drawer. And take the bulletproof one this time, he replied. Nope. I haven't even had a chance to drive that one yet. Garika took out a cigarette, but paused when she noticed Luoshu was still lingering behind. Remembering his student status, she stuffed the cigarette back and instead popped a fruit candy into her mouth. Something else? Luoshu pulled out a license and a wad of cash from his pocket. 300,000 yen in all. You forgot to take back what was in your wallet. Oh. Totally slipped my mind. Garika took the license but pushed the cash back toward him. That's your reward for taking out that hellhound. Don't worry. I'll get it reimbursed. Also, while you're at it, talk to Mika about the bounty forums. Have him set you up with a fake ID so you can sell intel on that hound's whereabouts. That alone should fetch you around 1 million yen. Owoshu was stunned. Wait, the guy's dead. What whereabouts am I supposed to report? Just submit a death photo. Have Mika write, target neutralized by law enforcement. Too bad you didn't have ID on you at the time. You could have claimed the corpse. Dead bodies are worth a lot more on the dark web. But if you go that route, the demon hunters will probably mark you. Owoshu clutched his chest in agony. Just how much was that thing worth? Especially in USD. From now on, he swore, he'd carry official ID at all times. No way he was missing out again. After imparting her criminally helpful advice, Garika pointed toward the back room. Alright, go get ready. Takina's already dressed and waiting. Sure enough, Takina had already changed into her uniform, looking stern and focused. Owoshu smiled sheepishly at her and hurried into the back to suit up as well. Chapter 51, The Worst Draw of Luck. 30 minutes later. In the streets of Becca Town, a black Santana driving on the left side cruised down the road. Wearing a Bluetooth earpiece, Takina Inoue was in the driver's seat, her face serious yet slightly awkward as she asked, confirm the address on the envelope again. She didn't seem very used to interacting with guys and had barely spoken a word to Luoshu the whole ride. Becca Town, Block 3, Number 17. According to Kurumi, it's a European-style villa. The owners recently left for a work trip to Europe with their family, so the place is currently unoccupied. The jewelry store clerk apparently had some connection with the man of the house, so she delivered one of the artifacts here. As Luoshu finished relaying the information, a mumbling female voice crackled through his earpiece. Kurumi. Hey newbie-kun, you'd better enroll in driving school soon. Not knowing how to drive is a pain in this line of work. Thanks for the reminder. I'll sign up once we're back, Luoshu replied, pressing his earpiece with a light smile. Oh? Unexpectedly obedient, are we? Kurumi chuckled. Want me to sign you up for our internal class? You could get a license in 7 days if you're quick. And if you pass, you'll be the first one in our group with a license. Aside from the chief, of course. The first one. Yeah, sure, help me register. After agreeing, Luoshu turned to glance at Takina, who skillfully turned the wheel and entered the district of Block 3. Wait. You're driving without a license? He asked with a raised eyebrow. Work habit, she replied with a straight face, clearly a bit guilty. Avoids leaving a traffic record. Oh. Makes sense. Before long, the black Santana stopped in front of a large, blue and white European-style villa with a spacious yard. We're here. Out. Stay alert, Takina ordered calmly. She still didn't talk much around Luoshu, likely because they weren't yet familiar. Luoshu touched the Sig Sauer P226 strapped to his waist, took it out, opened the car door, and scanned his surroundings. Seeing it was clear, he glanced at the black wrought iron gate in front of the villa, quickly estimating the wall next to it to be about 2.3 meters high. Then he shut the door with a bang and asked, We're climbing the wall? You cover me. Already out of the car, Takina drew her pistol, stepped back a few paces, then dashed forward. At just the right distance, she jumped up, stepped off the wall mid-leap, and vaulted gracefully over it, landing in the yard with practiced ease. Owoshu couldn't help but admire her. But just as he was about to follow, he glanced at the gate, suddenly thought of something, and walked over to try pulling the inner lock through the bars. With a soft creak, the gate opened. Owoshu stepped through and came face to face with Takina, who had just landed on the other side. The air was thick with awkward silence. Takina looked at him, clearly wanting to say something but choosing to hold it in. She simply adopted a tactical posture and quickly moved toward the villa's front entrance. PFFT. Kurami's suppressed giggle came through the earpiece. Luoshu awkwardly adjusted his earpiece and hurried after Takina. At the door, Takina said calmly, "I'll take the back. You go in from the front. We breach together in 30 seconds. She then pressed her earpiece and added, "Kurami, give us a countdown." Roger understood, Luoshu confirmed, watching Takina sneak toward the back as he stayed at the front. Suddenly, creak. He turned abruptly, gun at the ready, only to see the gate swaying in the wind. He let out a sigh of relief. Then Kurami's voice came again, "Adjust the chest cam." "Can't see clearly." Luoshu quickly adjusted the button on his uniform. Actually a concealed pinhole camera that streamed directly to Kurami in the underground surveillance room at Lycaris HQ. Good. Also, breach in 3 seconds. Bang. Luoshu kicked open the door and entered with his gun raised. At the same time, the rear entrance opened silently. Takina must have used a quieter method. So she's handling the covert entry while I'm drawing attention on the front? Standard partner tactics? Thinking this, Luoshu moved cautiously along the hallway. It was already evening, and the corridor was dimly lit, with no lights on. Being his first mission, Luoshu was understandably nervous. He planned to check the living room first. But after just a few steps, his eyelids twitched. His instinct flared. Super intuition had silently activated, alerting him not to overlook something. "I'm checking the shoe cabinet," Luoshu whispered to Kurami before stepping toward the large shoe rack at the entrance. He pulled out the top drawer and searched. Nothing. Then the second drawer. When he pulled out the third drawer and ran his hand along the bottom, he felt something off. "Found something?" Kurami's voice crackled in his ear. "There's a false bottom." Luoshu tossed the old, slightly musty shoes onto the ground and tapped on the drawer's base. The sound confirmed his suspicion. He then felt for a seam, hooked his nail underneath, and carefully pried it open. Sure enough. Under the bottom panel was a hidden compartment. Inside lay a flat, brownish sheet of paper with rough, weathered edges and strange, ink-black patterns that resembled runes. Luoshu examined it closely. This had to be the artifact, an abyssal item etched with demonic script. "Seems like I found it." As he spoke, a click sounded. Suddenly the hallway lights turned on. Without hesitation, Luoshu aimed his gun sideways on instinct, grabbed the artifact, and spun around. A woman stood there. Thick-soled shoes clacked on the wooden floor as she emerged from the living room and leaned against the hallway wall. Blonde, with long wavy hair, dressed in a deep blue nun's habit, she looked at Luoshu with emerald eyes, her expression both amused and curious. "Though I expected your type to find it, I didn't think it'd be hidden there. You've saved me some effort." Her tone was playful, her presence imposing. "Well done, officer," she said with a faint smile. "Now, if you don't mind handing over the demonic scripture." Seeing how confident she was even while staring down a gun, Luoshu shifted to face her fully and muttered, "Talk about luck. Just perfect?" As he moved, the camera on his chest captured her image and streamed it live. Hiss. Kurami's sharp inhale echoed in his ear. "What the hell? That's Sharon the Pure. One of the 7-star hunters of the demon's lairs. I thought she was deported." Luoshu stared at the nun's shapely figure and deadpanned, "Talk about drawing the worst fortune. Both figuratively and literally." Chapter 52, Sharon the Pure. Sharon the Pure? One of the 7-star demon hunters? Hearing Kurami's voice through the earpiece, Luoshu immediately recalled who she was. The same elite operative from the clandestine demon hunters organization, the one who had been set up by the MPD, fought a brutal battle against the warlock of the true celestial astronomy, and somehow even managed to escape from Natsuki-chan's grasp. A high-tier operative. This was bad news. After that moment of shock, Kurami's voice returned, trying to sound calm but clearly tense. "Luoshu, abandon the demonic script and retreat. I'll get Takina to cover you." She paused, perhaps afraid Luoshu might act impulsively, then quickly added, "In the demon hunters, star rank reflects both status and power. A 7-star hunter ranks just below the elders who lead the entire organization. She's a top-level sorceress with her own title. One of the strongest among all the hidden societies. We can't handle someone like her. At least not without a national-level exorcist from the Onmyoji Bureau." Luoshu narrowed his eyes at the warning, quickly gauging the distance between himself, the open front door, and Sharon. After a quick mental calculation, he chuckled and asked coldly, "If I drop the script, are you really going to let me walk away?" He kept his gaze fixed on Sharon. She was wearing a deep blue nun's habit, with a white and blue veil symbolizing purity. From Luoshu's angle, he could even make out the white tights beneath her skirt. A nun outfit with tights? And the habit had a cheongsam-style slit? What kind of bizarre combination was that? As Luoshu mentally complained, the blonde-haired nun, Sharon the Pure, smiled and responded, You don't have a choice, do you, officer? If you think the partner of yours hiding behind the corridor can pierce my spiritual armor at this range with a bullet, go ahead and try to escape. Her tone was laced with casual menace. At the far end of the hallway, Takina Inoue's brow twitched as she remained trained on Sharon. The message was clear. If Luoshu tried to run, Sharon could end him before they even reacted. This was a serious problem. Kurami's voice returned through the earpiece, more anxious now. I just used Chief Takabana's credentials to access the classified archives. Found Sharon's file. That nun outfit of hers is a grade 3 abyssal artifact she seized from the cross cult. It can deflect bullets from standard issue sniper rifles. Luoshu and Takina both felt that something was wrong immediately. If Sharon's outfit really could resist sniper rounds, then their sidearms were useless. But if she had such a massive advantage, why hadn't she simply killed them already? Something wasn't right. Luoshu's body tensed. Relying on his super intuition, he activated his spiritual sight. A kind of intuitive sixth sense that let him view his own 3 flames. The ability offered a 360-degree perception. Spiritual heat signatures that could expose subtle anomalies. Flicker. 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 Through his spiritual vision, Luoshu quickly spotted the 3 flames floating over his shoulders and above his head. All 3 were trembling faintly, swaying erratically. Abyssal artifact? His instincts screamed danger. He raised his gun. But not to fire at Sharon. Bang. 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 Luoshu suddenly fired 3 shots at the wall beside Takina Inoue, startling her into diving to the ground. She tucked into a roll and bolted out the rear entrance of the villa. Oh? You actually noticed? Sharon raised an eyebrow, intrigued. She seemed genuinely impressed that he'd sensed something was off. A moment later, gray mist began to flood the hallway. Its reach extended from the front door to the hallway's bend. Roughly a 15-meter stretch. That's odd. How did you know there was a range limitation? She asked curiously, raising her hand. A silver chain slid down her wrist with a distinct clink. At its center was a round orb engraved with an eye-like design. Inside, tiny steel beads rattled quietly as the ornament swayed. The Eye of Mist. According to your official classification system, it's a grade 2 dangerous artifact. Its function is to create an isolated alternate space, cut off from the real world. Sharon smiled like a hunter enjoying the helpless struggle of her prey. It takes a while to activate, and the radius is small. But it works wonders for catching targets, wouldn't you agree? She didn't seem to care that Takina had escaped. Instead, she looked at Luoshu with amusement. But here's the thing. Everyone who knew about this artifact's range has died. So, how did you figure it out, officer? Luoshu sighed, watching Sharon with exasperation. He removed his now static earpiece. The signal from Kurami had been cut off completely. They were isolated. Inside an alternate dimension, alone with Sharon, Luoshu reached a decision. He didn't lower his gun but shifted the artifact. The demonic script. From his right hand to his left. With his right hand, he subtly pointed his ring finger at Sharon. On that finger, he wore the heart of the demon. That's right. Luoshu was planning to hypnotize Sharon using the artifact. It was risky, but it might just flip the situation. But then, a warm breath grazed his ear. Someone was behind him. I really don't think you should move right now. A soft voice whispered in his ear as an arm snaked around his neck, locking it in a tight hold. Otherwise, I can't guarantee your head's going to stay attached to your body. Luoshu instinctively looked back toward where Sharon had been. But she was dissolving into white mist. Of course. She hadn't just blurted out the full effects of the Eye of Mist. That had all been misdirection. She'd used it to create a doppelganger and had silently circled behind him. Now, with her arm tight around his neck, she reached toward the demonic script in his hand. You really should have stayed down. Goodbye, unknown officer. I hope you dream sweetly. As she prepared to crush his neck with deceptive gentleness, Luoshu suddenly spoke, however. I refuse. Alarm bells went off in Sharon's head. She immediately tightened her grip, ready to snap his neck. But Luoshu shouted a single word in a strange, guttural tongue, exchange. It was demon speak. Sharon's eyes widened in disbelief. In the next moment, the demonic script in Luoshu's hand lit up. Deep crimson like coagulated blood, radiating a dark, ominous glow. Chapter 53, Success and Failure Coexist. A deep crimson glow, like congealed blood, burst into view, flooding both Luoshu and Sharon's vision. After a momentary flash of blindness, it was Luoshu who regained his sight first. However, what he saw wasn't what he expected. Standing right in front of him was a figure dressed in a black suit, towering a full head above him. Luoshu blinked, his eyes briefly losing focus as he tried to make sense of the scene. As his senses came back, he felt it clearly. His arm was hooked tightly around the neck of the person in front of him. He could even feel their body heat through their clothes. And then, ding, a familiar system chime rang in his ears. Interference power level, hero class. Affected area, soul. Beginning negative effect removal. Removal complete. Along with the system notification, Luoshu's vision seemed to split. A new perspective appeared. This time, from within the mist-shrouded corridor. He could now see the pale, slender arm wrapped around his neck, holding him in place. A smirk curled on his lips. The kind of smirk that belonged to a man whose plan had gone off without a hitch. The smirk of someone like Light Yagami. So, it worked after all. From this second perspective, Luoshu, now seeing through someone else's eyes, watched himself raise that slender arm and gently press it against his chest. The touch was soft. The feel unmistakably feminine. That's right. Luoshu was now seeing through Sharon's eyes. I win, pure Sharon. Luoshu had already been warned by the system. Identifying abyssal artifacts didn't cost him any points. So, the moment he acquired the demonic scroll, he instinctively used Identify on it. Just like he would have done in a game from his past life. The result. Artifact, exchange contract, hero class. Created by sacrificing a hero class parasite, the parchment is made from its skin. Main function, execute one-time body swap between the user and a designated target. Side effects, 1. Cooldown of 1 year minimum and can only be reactivated after 1 year for reversal. 2. Post-swap, the user will emit a foul stench that triggers instinctive repulsion from similar species. System note, this ability cannot be used on the host directly. If voluntarily used by host, the swap target becomes a secondary controllable body. System note, after becoming a secondary body, the swap target cannot intentionally harm the host. However, if the mental strength gap is large, some resistance may still occur. He didn't know what kind of scheme the warlock had planned with this body-swapping contract and the hypnotic heart of the demon, but the man was already dead. Now, Luoshu held both high-level artifacts in his hands. And with meticulous planning, had completely reversed the tables on Sharon. The fearsome 7-star demon hunter, one of the strongest members of the demon hunters, was now under his control. Her body, even, no longer her own. As Luoshu made his declaration of victory, Sharon seemed to finally regain awareness. Though her movements were sluggish and her body no longer obeyed as before, she managed to speak. You. What did you do to me? Just a little trick, Luoshu replied coolly. And then gave a light squeeze. Ah, correction. He gave her body a squeeze. Ugh. Pain flashing across her face, Sharon's cheeks flushed as she staggered backward, released from her own chokehold. Luoshu quickly backed away, mindful that this control was limited. Even now, Sharon's mental resistance was stronger than he had anticipated. Just a few forced actions caused a sharp pain between his eyebrows. Knowing things could turn quickly, Luoshu didn't hesitate. He raised his gun and pointed it at her. Just to be safe. Strip, Sharon. Her body visibly trembled. Sharon was resisting. But at such close range, and with the contract's mark. An ominous red eye embedded into both their right hands. Glowing faintly, her resistance was ultimately futile. Bit by bit, her hand reached for her nun attire. First came off the deep blue nun's robe. Then the blue and white veil symbolizing her purity. She struggled noticeably at that point, her hands pausing, fingers trembling as she tried to stop herself from removing it. Take it off. Luoshu barked and fired a warning shot. Bang. The bullet struck her arm. But instead of blood, all he felt was a dull impact, like a stone hitting skin. His eyes narrowed. So that's it. The veil is the real abyssal artifact. No wonder she fought so hard to keep it on. Without it, her body would no longer be protected from gunfire. And that's exactly what Luoshu wanted. He wasn't trying to see her naked for fun. He had a very real and very pressing reason, to ensure his own safety. Shaking, Sharon finally removed the veil. Her emerald eyes burned with rage as she stared at him. To have my symbol of purity taken by a man. What disgrace. I'll remember you, man. With a painful throb behind his eyes, Luoshu grimaced but watched as she tossed the veil to the floor. With a soft kick, she sent it rolling to his feet. He crouched, eyeing her now half-exposed form. White undergarments and sheer thigh-high stockings. His gaze swept her right side, a hidden pistol on her thigh, and based on the pressure under her foot, a blade concealed in her shoe. Damn, what was she? Another ruthless swordswoman from Ashina? Throw over your gun and the Eye of Mist. Even as he gave the order, Luoshu activated his control to force her compliance. Sharon continued to resist, but another bang silenced her. He shot her leg. Right through the calf. Pain exploded in his mind, making him groan, but Sharon merely gritted her teeth and dropped to one knee. Glaring up at him, she finally complied. She pulled off the Eye of Mist and flung it toward him. The moment the artifact left her hand, the gray fog blanketing the hallway began to recede. Apparently, the item required direct possession to remain active. The silver chain jangled in the air. For a moment, Luoshu's eyes followed the artifact's path. And that's when he saw it. A flash in his mind. A vision. Sharon rolling out of the house, retreating. Shit. The moment he realized, he raised his gun to fire. But by then, Sharon had already reached for the blade hidden in her shoe. Slash. Pain surged through Luoshu's palm. The blade pierced Sharon's hand. But he didn't let go of the gun. He tried to aim again, but Sharon was already gone, dashing out of the villa, vanishing from his line of sight. He cursed, wincing from the lingering pain and trying to give chase. Only to be interrupted by the sound of gunfire outside. Bang. Bang. More shots. Luoshu gasped, staggered, and dropped to a crouch. Damn it. She wasn't supposed to be able to hurt me. How can she self-harm like this? Breathing heavily, Luoshu swore under his breath and backed away. But despite the escape, he couldn't help but smirk wryly. Well, maybe it's better this way. At least I get to keep everything for myself. Thinking this, he hurriedly picked up the discarded veil and Eye of Mist, then spent 5 system points to instantly transport the artifacts to the Astronomy Club's base. Just as he finished, he heard light footsteps. You, okay? Inoue Takina entered cautiously, gun in hand. Upon seeing him, she sighed in relief. Luoshu instinctively took a step back from her gun, then asked, where is she? Shot her twice. She climbed over the wall and ran. She was fast. I couldn't keep up. I just fired until I emptied the clip, Takina replied, pausing with a hint of guilt. Firing blindly and still managing to shoot her arm, hand, and abdomen. Luoshu recalled the pain from earlier and twitched at the memory. After a moment, he exhaled and said, tell Kurumi to report everything to the chief. Got it. Chapter 54, Takabana Girika got played twice. Are you alright? Takabana Girika rushed over, her expression tense as she looked Luoshu and Inoue Takina over. Once she saw that neither of them was seriously hurt, she finally let out a breath of relief. Chief, Takina greeted her at the entrance, but after a moment of hesitation, she lowered her head apologetically. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop the enemy. I wasted the opportunity Luoshu created. Stop her? Misaka raised an eyebrow at Takina's guilty tone, and after a brief pause, chuckled. She reached out and patted Takina's shoulder. Takina, just surviving an encounter with someone at that level is already a miracle. And you're still thinking about stopping her? She said with a wry smile. If Sharon the Pure, one of the 7-star demon hunters, were that easy to deal with, I wouldn't have been so panicked when I heard the report. You should really cut yourself some slack. After another comforting pat, Misaka walked up to the doorway and looked at Luoshu. Though he had calmed down by now, his face was still pale. She raised her hand and lightly tapped his chest. Good job, Mr. Ace. I'd rather be paid than praised, Luoshu replied, rolling his eyes. I only wanted to play the slacker, so how did I end up becoming the main force? While he grumbled inwardly, Girika laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. I'll make sure the division approves your special bonus. And if not, I'll pay you out of my own pocket. With that, she leaned in, gave him a hug, kissed him on the forehead, and gave a wink. Consider this in advance. Now cooperate with the on-site investigation. I'll send you home to rest afterward. She brushed past the dazed Luoshu and stepped into the entranceway, surveying the scene. The bullet holes, the discarded nun outfit and weapon, and the bloodstains on the floor. Her eyes narrowed as she crouched down, touched the now coagulating blood, and glanced at the corridor. Can you reconstruct the events for me?